She stood in his kitchen wearing his dead wife's robe and asked the one question that could destroy everything he'd built. "Did we sleep together last night?" Ryan Carter felt the coffee mug slip from his fingers. It shattered against the tile floor, but he couldn't move, couldn't breathe. His 7-year-old daughter was upstairs. His boss, the untouchable Vivian Hale, was standing 3 feet away, mascara smeared beneath her eyes, waiting for an answer that would determine whether he still had a job by Monday. One act of kindness. That's all it was supposed to be. If you want to know how one night nearly destroyed a single father's life, and how it unexpectedly gave him something he never thought he'd have again, stay with me until the very end. Hit that like button, subscribe, and drop a comment telling me which city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. Now, let me take you back to where it all began. The alarm screamed at 5:47 a.m., 13 minutes before it was supposed to. Ryan Carter's hand shot out from beneath the covers, slapping blindly at his nightstand until his palm connected with the phone. The screen's blue glow stabbed at his eyes as he silenced it, and for 3 precious seconds, he lay perfectly still in the darkness of his bedroom, staring at the ceiling he'd memorized over 4 years of sleepless nights. Friday, he thought. Just get through Friday. The house was silent in that particular way that only empty spaces can be. Not peaceful, but hollow. Ryan pushed himself upright, his bare feet finding the cold hardwood floor, and he sat on the edge of the bed for a moment, gathering the energy he'd need to pretend he had any left. The bedroom still looked exactly as it had when Sarah was alive. Her pillow remained on the left side of the bed, untouched. Her reading glasses sat on the nightstand, lenses dusty now, perched atop a novel she'd never finished. The closet door stayed closed because Ryan couldn't bear to see her dresses hanging there, like ghosts of a life that had been stolen from him. 4 years. 4 years since the accident. 4 years of learning how to be both mother and father to a little girl who still sometimes called out for mommy in her sleep. Ryan stood, stretched the ache from his 34-year-old bones, and padded toward the bathroom. The face that greeted him in the mirror was one he barely recognized anymore. Dark circles carved beneath hazel eyes, stubble he'd forgotten to shave for 2 days, lines etched around his mouth that hadn't been there before Sarah's funeral. When did I start looking so tired? The answer was simple. The same day he'd started being tired. He showered quickly, the hot water a brief luxury he couldn't afford to extend. By 6:15, he was dressed in his usual uniform, khaki pants, blue button-down, sensible shoes that could handle both the office carpet and chasing a 7-year-old around a playground. He'd learned long ago that fashion was a luxury single parents couldn't afford, function over form. Always. The hallway to Mia's room was lined with photographs that Sarah had insisted on hanging during her nesting phase, back when they'd first bought this house, with dreams of filling every bedroom with children. Now there was only Mia, and the frames held a chronicle of her life. Newborn, first steps, first day of preschool, gap-toothed smile after losing her first tooth. In every photo, she looked more and more like her mother. Ryan pushed open Mia's door gently, letting the hallway light spill across her pink comforter. She was curled into a ball in the center of the bed, her stuffed elephant, Mr. Trunk, clutched against her chest. Her dark hair fanned across the pillow, and in sleep she looked peaceful in a way she rarely did when awake. "Hey, sunshine," Ryan said softly, sitting on the edge of her bed. "Time to wake up." Mia's face scrunched, and she pulled Mr. Trunk closer. 5 more minutes. "You said that yesterday, and we were almost late for school." "Almost isn't late," she mumbled, her logic impeccable even at half-consciousness. Ryan smiled despite himself, the first genuine expression his face had made since waking. "Come on, Bug, I'm making pancakes." One eye opened. "The chocolate chip kind? Is there any other kind worth making?" That did it. Mia sat up, her hair a bird's nest of tangles, and rubbed her eyes with her fists. "Daddy? Yeah, baby? Tonight's my recital. You didn't forget, right?" The words hit Ryan like a punch to the chest. Of course he hadn't forgotten. He'd had the date circled on his calendar for 6 weeks, had requested the time off from work, had bought a new outfit for Mia that was currently hanging in her closet with the tags still on. The recital was the only thing she'd talked about for 2 months straight. "I didn't forget," he promised, brushing a strand of hair from her face. 7 o'clock. I'll be in the front row. Wouldn't miss it for anything in the world. Mia's smile could have powered the entire house. Miss Caroline says I'm the best at the twirl part. She says I have natural grace, whatever that means. It means you got your mom's talent, Ryan said, and the words only hurt a little now. Now come on. Pancakes wait for no one. Oh. The morning routine was a carefully choreographed dance that Ryan had perfected over 4 years of necessity. Pancakes on the griddle while Mia brushed her teeth, hair brushed and braided while pancakes cooled, backpack checked, lunch packed, shoes tied, out the door by 7:15 to make the 15-minute drive to Millbrook Elementary. Ryan's Honda Civic had seen better days. The passenger door had a dent from a shopping cart incident, and the air conditioning made a concerning rattle every time it kicked on. But it was reliable, and reliability was the only currency Ryan dealt in anymore. Mia chattered the entire drive, her voice filling the car with updates about her best friend Sophie, her nemesis Justin, who kept pulling her hair during reading time, and the exact sequence of moves she'd be performing at the recital. And then we do the big finish where everyone spreads their arms like this, she demonstrated from her booster seat, nearly smacking Ryan in the face. And Miss Caroline says we have to smile really big because that's what makes it perfect. And you've been practicing your big smile? Mia nodded seriously. In the mirror, like this. She bared her teeth in an expression that was more terrifying than endearing. Ryan laughed, actually laughed, and reached over to squeeze her hand. Maybe dial it back about 30%, Bug. What's 30%? About this much. He demonstrated a more natural smile. Oh, okay. I can do that. Millbrook Elementary materialized ahead, a sprawling brick building surrounded by yellow buses and minivans. Ryan pulled into the drop-off lane and put the car in park, turning to face his daughter. Okay, you've got everything? Backpack? Lunch? Permission slip for the field trip? Mia patted her backpack like a professional. All here. And what do we say if someone offers us something that doesn't feel right? No thank you, and find a teacher. That's my girl. Ryan unbuckled her seatbelt and pulled her into a hug, breathing in the strawberry scent of her shampoo. I love you more than all the stars in the sky. I love you more than all the pancakes in the world, Mia replied. Their ritual, the same exchange every morning for 3 years now. I'll see you tonight, Ryan said as she climbed out of the car. Break a leg. Mia paused, her face suddenly serious. Daddy, that's a really mean thing to say to someone before they dance. It's an expression, Bug. It means good luck. Then why don't people just say good luck? Ryan opened his mouth to explain, realized he had no good answer, and simply said, I honestly have no idea. Mia shrugged with the acceptance only children possess and waved before skipping toward the entrance. Ryan watched until she disappeared through the doors, the same knot of worry tightening in his chest that appeared every time she left his sight. She's fine. She's safe. She's okay. He repeated the mantra 3 times before pulling away. Hartwell and Associates occupied the 7th floor of a glass tower in downtown Portland, the kind of building that made Ryan feel small every time he walked through the revolving doors. He'd been working there for 6 years now, started as a junior analyst fresh out of college, survived 2 rounds of layoffs, and clawed his way up to senior financial analyst through nothing but sheer persistence and an inability to say no. The office was already buzzing when he stepped off the elevator at 7:58, 2 minutes before his official start time. The open floor plan meant there was no hiding, no privacy, nowhere to escape the constant hum of keyboards and phone calls and whispered gossip. Carter. Ryan turned to find his cubicle neighbor, Dennis Park, waving him over with barely contained excitement. Dennis was the kind of guy who treated office drama like a spectator sport, always first with the rumors, always ready with commentary. You hear about tonight? Dennis asked, practically vibrating. Ryan set his messenger bag on his desk. Tonight is my daughter's recital, so whatever's happening here doesn't concern me. The quarterly celebration, man. Big announcement. Word is Vivian's getting promoted to VP. Ryan's eyebrows rose. Vivian Hale had been director of finance for 3 years, and in that time she'd developed a reputation that preceded her like a cold front. Brilliant, ruthless, exacting. She'd once made a grown man cry during a budget meeting because his projections were off by 2%. The nickname whispered behind her back was the Ice Queen, and from what Ryan had observed, she'd earned it. Good for her, he said neutrally, logging into his computer. Good for her? The woman's a robot, Carter. I've never seen her smile, not once. 3 years, and I don't think she has actual human emotions. Maybe she's just private. Dennis snorted. Private? She's a glacier. You know she turned down the office Secret Santa last year? Said she didn't have time for frivolous workplace bonding exercises. Ryan thought about pointing out that Secret Santa was, in fact, a frivolous workplace bonding exercise, but he didn't have the energy. Instead, he pulled up his inbox and felt his stomach drop. 47 emails. 47 emails that had accumulated since he'd left at 5:30 yesterday. The first was from Vivian herself, time-stamped at 11:43 p.m. Need Q3 variance analysis by EOD Friday. Full breakdown by department. No exceptions. Ryan stared at the email, then at the clock on his computer. EOD Friday gave him roughly 9 hours to compile data that should have taken 2 days. And tonight was the recital. Tonight was the one thing he'd promised Mia he wouldn't miss. You okay? Dennis asked, apparently noticing Ryan's expression. You look like someone just kicked your puppy. Just work stuff, Ryan managed. Big deadline. Yeah, Vivian's been on a tear. Finance team says she's been in the office until midnight every night this week. Dennis lowered his voice conspiratorially. Rumor is her divorce just finalized. Caught her husband with his assistant. Can you imagine? Ice Queen getting cucked? That's not really any of our business, Ryan said, though the information landed somewhere in his consciousness and stuck. He'd seen Vivian around the office, of course. Impossible not to. She moved through the floor like a shark through water, all sharp angles and purposeful strides. She was maybe 40, with auburn hair she kept pulled back in a severe bun and eyes the color of a winter sky. Beautiful, objectively speaking, in the way that marble statues are beautiful, cold, untouchable, not meant for hands like his. Ryan had never spoken to her directly. He was 3 levels below her on the org chart, invisible in the way that worker bees are always invisible to the queen. She'd walked past his cubicle 100 times without so much as a glance in his direction. Which was fine. Ryan didn't need to be seen. He just needed to do his job, collect his paycheck, and make sure Mia had everything she needed, including being at her recital tonight. He pulled up the quarterly data and started working. By noon, Ryan had made it through about a third of the analysis. His eyes burned from staring at spreadsheets, his back ached from his terrible posture, and his lunch, a sad turkey sandwich from the break room vending machine, sat half-eaten beside his keyboard. The office had filled in around him, bodies moving through the maze of cubicles like cells through a bloodstream. Ryan barely registered any of it. His entire focus narrowed to the numbers swimming across his screen. Carter! The voice came from directly behind him, and Ryan's spine went rigid. He swiveled in his chair to find Vivian Hale standing at the entrance to his cubicle, a tablet clutched against her chest like a shield. She looked different up close. The rumors about her never smiling weren't quite accurate. Her mouth was set in a neutral line that could have gone either way. But there was something around her eyes, something tired, something that looked almost human. Ms. Hale, he managed, standing so quickly he nearly knocked over his coffee. I'm working on the variance analysis now. Should have it to you by... I know what you're working on. Her voice was cool, professional, entirely unreadable. I came to tell you we need to push the deadline. There's been a discrepancy in the manufacturing data. I need you to reconcile the numbers before the analysis can move forward. Ryan felt something cold settle in his stomach. How much of a discrepancy? About 40,000 units spread across 3 product lines. Should add another 2 hours to your timeline. 2 hours. 2 hours on top of the 6 he still needed. That would put him finishing at... Ryan did the math and felt his heart sink. 7 o'clock. The exact moment Mia's recital started. Ms. Hale, he started, his voice carefully measured. I have a personal commitment tonight at 7. My daughter's dance recital. Is there any way... This isn't a suggestion, Carter. Vivian's eyes met his, and for a moment something flickered there. Something that might have been sympathy, quickly extinguished. The board needs these numbers for Monday's meeting. There is no flexibility. I understand, but I'm not unsympathetic to work-life balance, she continued, and the words sounded rehearsed, like a corporate speech she'd given 100 times. But quarterly reports don't pause for school plays. It's a dance recital. The correction came out before Ryan could stop it, and for a moment they simply stared at each other. Vivian's expression didn't change, but something shifted behind her eyes. Surprise, maybe, that someone had actually pushed back. Dance recital, she amended. The point stands. I need this report, Carter. The company needs this report. I expect it in my inbox by end of day, or we'll have a different conversation Monday morning. She turned and walked away, her heels clicking against the tile floor like a metronome counting down his remaining time. Ryan sank back into his chair and stared at the spreadsheet in front of him. The numbers blurred, swimming together into an incomprehensible mess. 7 o'clock. Front row. Wouldn't miss it for anything in the world. He'd made that promise to Mia's face, watched her light up with excitement and trust and love. And now? Ryan pulled out his phone, scrolling to his neighbor's contact. Elaine Marsh was 67 years old, retired, and had become something of a surrogate grandmother to Mia after Sarah's death. She watched Mia on the rare occasions Ryan couldn't get home in time, had taught her how to bake cookies, and loved her almost as much as he did. He typed out a text. Hey Elaine, running into a work situation. Might be late tonight. Can you pick up Mia and take her to the recital if I'm not back by 6? The reply came almost immediately. Of course, dear. Everything okay? Just work stuff. Thank you. I owe you. You owe me nothing. That child is a joy. Just try to be there if you can. You know how much she wants you to see her dance? Ryan read the message 3 times, each word a knife twisting in his gut. He knew exactly how much Mia wanted him there. And he knew that if he wasn't, it would be another in a long line of disappointments that came with being the daughter of a man who had to be everything to everyone, all the time. I'll try, he typed back. I promise I'll try. Tip. The hours that followed were a blur of formulas and cross-references and increasingly desperate calculations. Ryan worked through the afternoon without pause, skipping his afternoon coffee break, declining Dennis's invitation to join the others for happy hour at the bar across the street. The quarterly celebration kicked off at 5 p.m. in the large conference room, and Ryan could hear the festivities from his cubicle, laughter and music and the clink of glasses. Someone had ordered catering. The smell of fancy hors d'oeuvres drifted through the office, a cruel reminder that other people got to have things like parties and celebrations. At 5:47, Ryan's phone buzzed with a picture from Elaine. Mia in her recital outfit, a sparkly blue leotard with a matching tutu, her hair pulled back in a neat bun that Ryan never could have managed. She was beaming at the camera, holding up a peace sign. Already at the auditorium, Elaine's caption read, "She's so excited. Says she's going to do her biggest smile when she sees you in the audience." Ryan closed his eyes for a long moment, pressing his palm against the ache in his chest. Almost done, he told himself. Just 2 more hours. I can still make it. I can still be there. At 6:15, he was 90% finished. At 6:30, 94%. At 6:47, with the recital starting in 13 minutes and a solid 40-minute drive between him and the auditorium, Ryan hit the final keystroke and attached the report to an email addressed to Vivian Hale. Done. Sent. Go. He grabbed his jacket and bolted for the elevator, jabbing the button with his finger like his life depended on it. When the doors opened, he found himself face to face with the quarterly celebration he'd been ignoring all evening. The conference room doors were open, and the party had spilled into the hallway. Ryan weaved through colleagues holding wine glasses and cocktail napkins, murmuring apologies as he pushed toward the exit. He was almost to the elevator bank when he saw her. Vivian Hale stood near the bar, a glass of red wine clutched in her hand. She wasn't mingling with the others, was standing apart, actually, her back to the windows, watching the party unfold with an expression Ryan couldn't quite decipher. She was on her 4th glass. Ryan only knew this because he'd been watching without meaning to, had noticed the slight unsteadiness in her movements, the way her carefully composed mask had started to slip. None of your business, he reminded himself. Get to the recital. Get to Mia. He hit the elevator button and waited. Carter. His name slurred slightly around the edges. Ryan turned to find Vivian approaching, her walk not quite straight, her wine glass tilting dangerously. "Ms. Hale," he said carefully, "I sent you the report. If there are revisions needed, I can address them Monday. I saw it." She stopped in front of him, close enough that he could smell the wine on her breath, see the red rimming her eyes. Up close, the facade cracked further. She looked exhausted, hollowed out, like someone who had been carrying a weight too heavy for too long. "Good work." "Thank you. I really need to—" "Do you know what today is?" The question came out of nowhere, and Vivian didn't wait for an answer. "Would have been my anniversary, 15 years. Would have been." She laughed, a sharp, bitter sound. "Instead, I got divorce papers and a restraining order. Quite the celebration." Ryan felt his escape window closing, felt the minutes ticking by, but something in her face kept him rooted to the spot. "I'm sorry," he said, and meant it. "Don't be." Vivian took another sip of wine. More of a gulp, really. "He's the one who's sorry now. Him and his 24-year-old assistant. I hope they're very happy in their studio apartment." "Ms. Haley, do you have a ride home tonight?" The question surprised them both. Vivian blinked at him, processing, and for a moment her mask slipped completely. Beneath the ice, beneath the professionalism, she just looked sad. Unbearably, fundamentally sad. "My car's in the lot," she said, and the words were definitely slurred now. "You can't drive like this." "Like what?" "Like you've had 4 glasses of wine and probably didn't eat today." Something flickered across her face, surprise maybe that he'd been paying attention. "I'm fine." "You're not." Ryan checked his phone, 6:52. The recital had already started. Mia was already on stage looking for him in the audience, finding his seat empty. He could feel the disappointment in his daughter's eyes even from 40 miles away. But he couldn't just leave Vivian like this. Couldn't let her get behind the wheel, couldn't let her become a statistic, couldn't let another woman die because the universe had a sick sense of humor. Sarah was stone-cold sober, the voice in his head whispered. Didn't matter, other driver was drunk. Sarah died anyway. "I'll call you a cab," Ryan said, already pulling out his phone. Vivian swayed slightly. "I don't need a cab." "Then I'll drive you myself." The elevator dinged, the doors opened, and Ryan Carter made a choice that would change everything. "Come on," he said, taking her gently by the elbow. "Let's get you home." Vivian fell asleep in the passenger seat before they'd even made it out of the parking garage. Ryan glanced over at her, head tilted against the window, breathing even, mascara smearing against the glass, and felt a complicated tangle of emotions he couldn't begin to unpack. She looked smaller somehow, crumpled in on herself, nothing like the imposing figure who had demanded his report that morning. He followed the GPS directions to her address, a high-rise condo building in the Pearl District, the kind of place that had a doorman and probably a gym with towel service. When he pulled up to the entrance, Vivian was still out cold. "Miss Hale." He shook her shoulder gently. "We're here." "Nothing." "Vivian?" She stirred, blinked, looked around in confusion. "Where?" "Your building. Can you make it up okay?" She fumbled for her purse, rifled through it with increasing desperation, and finally looked up at him with something approaching panic. "My keys. I can't." She dumped the contents of her purse into her lap. Lipstick, phone, wallet, a handful of receipts, but no keys. "They were in my desk. I left them in my desk at the office." Ryan checked the time. 7:23. The recital was almost half over. Mia had already done her dance, already looked for him and found him missing, already felt the sting of another broken promise. What's one more hour, he thought bitterly. Might as well commit to the disaster. "I can take you back to the office," he offered. "Get your keys." "I can't." Vivian's voice cracked, the first real emotion Ryan had heard from her since she told him about her divorce. "I can't go back there, not tonight. I can't let them see me like this." Ryan sat in the driver's seat for a long moment, weighing options that were all bad against options that were worse. He could leave her here, stranded and alone and drunk on the anniversary of her failed marriage. He could take her back to the office, let her colleagues see her at her lowest. He could— "I have a guest room," he heard himself say. "You can sleep it off there. I'll take you to get your keys in the morning." Vivian turned to look at him, really look at him, for what felt like the first time. "You do that? For your boss?" "I'd do it for anyone," Ryan said honestly. "It's just the right thing to do." Something shifted in her expression. Gratitude, maybe, or something deeper. But she was too drunk to articulate it. Instead, she simply nodded and leaned her head back against the seat. "Thank you, Ryan." It was the first time she'd used his first name. Getting Vivian into the house was an adventure. She could barely walk, leaning heavily on Ryan's arm as he guided her up the front steps. The porch light was on. Elaine must have come by to check on things, and for a moment Ryan stood at his own front door, struck by the absurdity of the situation. His daughter's dance recital was happening right now, without him. And he was about to bring his drunk boss into his home, into the space where he'd built his fragile, careful life after Sarah's death. This is insane, he thought as he unlocked the door. This is absolutely insane. The house was quiet, dark except for the lamp in the living room that ran on a timer. Ryan helped Vivian to the stairs, and she clutched the railing like a lifeline. "Guest room's at the top, first door on the right," he said. "There's a bathroom attached. I'll put some water and aspirin on the nightstand." Vivian nodded, already starting up the stairs. Halfway up, she paused and looked back at him. "Why are you being so nice to me?" The question was plaintive, almost childlike. "I'm not nice to you. I'm not nice to anyone." Ryan considered the question seriously. "Because everyone deserves kindness, even people who forget to show it to others." Vivian stared at him for a long moment, something unreadable moving behind her eyes. Then she turned and continued up the stairs without another word. Ryan listened to her footsteps overhead, heard the guest room door close, and finally let himself sink onto the couch. He pulled out his phone, dreading what he'd find. 3 missed calls from Elaine. 2 texts. "Where are you? Mia keeps looking for you." And then, 20 minutes later, "The recital's over. She did beautifully, but she cried when she couldn't find you." "Ryan, what happened?" He called Elaine back with shaking hands. "Ryan, where on earth—" "I'm so sorry." The words felt inadequate, pathetic. "Something happened at work. An emergency. I couldn't—" "Ryan, that little girl's heart is broken. She did her dance perfectly, did the twirl just like she practiced, and the whole time she was looking at your empty seat." Ryan closed his eyes, feeling the tears he'd been holding back all day finally threatening to fall. "Is she okay?" "She's with me. We got ice cream. She's sleeping now." Elaine's voice softened. What kind of emergency keeps a father from his daughter's recital? How could he explain? How could he put into words the chain of events that had led him here? The demanding report, the drunk boss, the keys left at the office, the decision to help someone who had never shown him an ounce of kindness. "My boss needed help," he said finally. "I couldn't just leave her." A long silence on the other end of the line. "Well," Elaine said finally, "I hope your boss appreciates what it cost you." So do I, Ryan thought. So do I. "Can I come get Mia?" "Let her sleep. She's exhausted from crying and dancing and disappointment. You can pick her up in the morning." "Elaine, I know, dear. I know you did what you thought was right. But tomorrow, you need to make this right with your daughter. She only gets one childhood, Ryan. She only gets one you." The line went dead, and Ryan sat in the darkness of his living room, surrounded by the ghosts of a life that kept slipping through his fingers no matter how hard he tried to hold on. Upstairs, he could hear Vivian moving around the guest room. Footsteps, the creak of the bed, then silence. Tomorrow, he would deal with the fallout. Tomorrow, he would try to explain to Mia why Daddy's work was more important than her dance. Tomorrow, he would figure out how to look his boss in the eye after seeing her at her most vulnerable. But tonight, Ryan Carter simply sat in the dark and wondered when his life had become a series of impossible choices, each one breaking something precious that he couldn't repair. Outside, the stars wheeled overhead, indifferent to the small tragedies unfolding below. And somewhere across town, a 7-year-old girl with her mother's eyes slept with dried tears on her cheeks, clutching a stuffed elephant to her chest, dreaming of a father who hadn't come. Ryan didn't sleep that night. He tried, lay on the couch with a blanket pulled up to his chin, staring at the ceiling fan as it rotated in lazy circles overhead, But every time he closed his eyes, he saw Mia's face. Not the beaming smile from the photo Elaine had sent, but the face he imagined she'd worn when she scanned the audience and found his seat empty. The confusion first, then the hope that maybe he was just late. Then the slow, crushing realization that he wasn't coming at all. At 3:47 a.m., he gave up on sleep entirely and went to the kitchen to make coffee. The house was silent except for the hum of the refrigerator and the occasional creak of old bones settling. Ryan stood at the counter, waiting for the pot to fill, and tried to make sense of the past 12 hours. His boss was asleep in his guest room. His daughter was across town, nursing a broken heart. And he was standing in the dark, caught between two worlds that had never been meant to collide. The coffee finished brewing, and Ryan poured himself a cup, wrapping his hands around the warmth. Through the kitchen window, he could see the first hints of dawn bleeding into the horizon, purple and pink and gold, a beautiful sunrise for a day that promised to be anything but. He thought about Vivian upstairs, passed out in the room that had once been Sarah's craft space. After the funeral, Ryan had cleaned it out, donated Sarah's sewing machine and fabric collection to the community center, and converted it into a generic guest room that never had guests. Until now. What must it be like, he wondered, to have your whole life fall apart so publicly? To build a career on being untouchable, unreachable, and then have your husband leave you for someone half your age? Ryan didn't know the details, didn't want to know, but he could recognize pain when he saw it. Last night, beneath the ice and the wine, Vivian Hale had been drowning. At 5:30, the sun finally crested the horizon, flooding the kitchen with golden light. Ryan showered, changed into jeans and a t-shirt, and started making pancakes out of pure habit. It was Saturday, Pancake Day, as Mia called it, and even though she wasn't here, the routine felt necessary. Normal. Something to anchor him to the life he was supposed to be living. The batter was just hitting the griddle when he heard footsteps on the stairs. Ryan's hand froze over the pan, spatula suspended in midair. He hadn't planned for this part, hadn't thought about what he would say to Vivian in the harsh light of morning, without the cover of darkness and emergency to justify their proximity. She appeared in the doorway like a ghost, still wearing the clothes from last night, a gray silk blouse now wrinkled beyond repair, black slacks, bare feet. Her hair had come loose from its bun and hung around her face in tangles. Without makeup, without the armor of her professional persona, she looked younger, softer, utterly lost. "Good morning," Ryan said, because someone had to say something. Vivian blinked at him, then at the kitchen, then back at him. "Where am I?" "My house. You lost your keys last night, and I couldn't take you back to the office, so I brought you here." He flipped the pancake, grateful for something to do with his hands. "There's coffee, if you want some." "Your house." She repeated the words like they were in a foreign language. "I'm in your house." "Guest room. You slept in the guest room." Vivian pressed her palm against her forehead, and Ryan could practically see her assembling the fragments of last night into something coherent. The party. The wine. The parking garage, the drive. "I remember." She trailed off, and Ryan watched her face change as the memories surfaced. "I remember you helping me into the car, and then nothing. Everything after that is blank." The pancake was done. Ryan slid it onto a plate and poured another circle of batter, keeping his eyes on the griddle. "You fell asleep almost immediately. I drove you home, but you couldn't find your keys, so I brought you here instead." "And then what?" "And then you went to bed." "But what happened before that?" Vivian's voice had gone tight, strained. "Between the car and the bed, what happened?" Ryan finally looked up, meeting her eyes across the kitchen. She was gripping the doorframe like it was the only thing keeping her upright, and her face had gone pale beneath yesterday's faded makeup. "Nothing happened," he said quietly. "I helped you up the stairs, showed you the guest room, and left you to sleep. That's all." "That's all?" "That's all." Vivian didn't look convinced. She released the doorframe and took a tentative step into the kitchen, her eyes scanning the space like she expected to find evidence of something terrible. "We didn't..." She couldn't seem to finish the sentence. Ryan turned off the stove and faced her fully, giving the conversation the weight it demanded. "Ms. Hale, nothing happened between us. I would never take advantage of someone in your condition. I helped you because you needed help, And that's the end of the story. For a long moment, Vivian just stared at him. Then, slowly, the tension drained from her shoulders. Her eyes went wet, and she pressed her hand against her mouth like she was trying to hold something in. "Thank you," she whispered. "You don't need to thank me." "Yes, I do." She lowered her hand, and Ryan was struck by how different she looked from the woman who had demanded his report yesterday morning. That woman had been a fortress. This woman was a ruin. "You could have left me at the party. You could have let me drive home drunk and crash my car. You could have—" She stopped, shook her head. "Most people would have." "I'm not most people." The words hung at the air between them, heavier than Ryan had intended. Vivian held his gaze for a beat too long, and something passed between them. Recognition, maybe, or the beginning of understanding. The moment broke when Vivian's eyes drifted to the counter where Ryan's phone sat face up. The screen displayed his background image. Mia at last year's birthday party, face covered in chocolate frosting, grinning like she'd just won the lottery. "Your daughter," Vivian said. It wasn't a question. "Yeah." "How old?" "7. Vivian nodded slowly, processing. "Last night, you mentioned a recital." The word hit Ryan like a physical blow. He turned back to the stove, not trusting his face to hide what he was feeling. "I missed it. Because of me. Because of work." The distinction felt important, even if it wasn't entirely true. The report couldn't wait. "The report I demanded." Vivian's voice had gone flat. "The report that kept you at the office until 7 o'clock on the night of your daughter's performance." Ryan didn't answer. What was there to say? "Ryan." It was the second time she'd used his first name, and hearing it made something shift in his chest. "Look at me." He turned, spatula still in hand, and found her standing much closer than before. Her eyes were red-rimmed and bloodshot, but clear now, clearer than they'd been since the party started. "I'm sorry," she said. "I'm sorry about the deadline, and I'm sorry about keeping you late, and I'm sorry that my inability to handle my personal life cost your daughter her father in the audience." She swallowed hard. "I know sorry doesn't fix anything, but I need you to know that I am, truly." Ryan had imagined a lot of scenarios for how this morning might go. Awkward small talk, stiff professionalism, maybe even denial, pretending the whole thing had never happened. He hadn't imagined this. Vivian Hale, the ice queen of Hartwell and Associates, standing in his kitchen and offering a genuine apology with tears in her eyes. "It's okay," he said, even though it wasn't. "It's not, but I'm going to make it up to you." She straightened her spine, some of the steel returning to her posture. "Starting with not making you drive me back to the office. I'll call a car service." "Don't be ridiculous. I'll take you." "You've done enough." "I'm already making pancakes." Ryan gestured toward the counter where a small stack had accumulated. "Have breakfast first, then I'll drive you." Vivian opened her mouth to argue, but before she could speak, a new sound cut through the kitchen, the front door opening, followed by the rapid patter of small feet. "Daddy! Daddy, I'm home!" Ryan's heart stopped. He'd forgotten. Somehow, impossibly, he'd forgotten that Elaine was bringing Mia back this morning. And now his daughter was about to walk into the kitchen and find a strange woman wearing rumpled clothes and the unmistakable look of a rough night. Mia appeared in the doorway half a second later, still in her pajamas, her hair a wild tangle that suggested she'd slept hard. She skidded to a stop when she saw Vivian, her little forehead creasing in confusion. "Daddy, who's that?" Ryan set down the spatula and crouched to her level, opening his arms. After a moment of hesitation, Mia ran into them, burying her face against his shoulder. "Hey, Bug," he murmured into her hair. "I'm so sorry about last night. I'm so sorry." He felt her shrug against him, the careless forgiveness of childhood. But when she pulled back, her eyes were guarded in a way that broke his heart. "You missed my twirl," she said quietly. "I did it perfect, and you missed it." "I know, baby. I know. You said you'd be there. You promised." "I did, and I broke that promise. And I'm sorrier than you'll ever know." Ryan brushed a strand of hair from her face. "Can you forgive me?" Mia considered the question with the seriousness only 7-year-olds possess. Then her eyes drifted to Vivian, who was standing frozen by the stove like she was afraid any movement might shatter the moment. "Is she why you weren't there?" Mia asked. The question was innocent enough, but Ryan felt Vivian flinch behind him. "No, honey. Work is why I wasn't there. This is Ms. Hale. She's my boss. She wasn't feeling well last night, so she stayed in our guest room." Mia processed this information, her nose scrunching in the way it always did when she was thinking hard. Then she marched across the kitchen and stopped directly in front of Vivian, tilting her head back to look up at her. "Are you feeling better now?" she asked. Vivian blinked, clearly caught off guard by the direct address. Yes, a little. Good. When I'm sick, Daddy makes me pancakes and reads me stories. Did he make you pancakes?" "He was just about to, I think." Mia nodded approvingly. "Daddy's pancakes are the best. They have chocolate chips." She paused, then added with devastating honesty, "You look really tired. Your eyes are all red." "Mia," Ryan said gently, but Vivian held up a hand. "It's okay." She crouched down to Mia's level, mirroring what Ryan had done moments before. "I am really tired. I had a very hard week, and I made some poor choices, and your father was kind enough to help me when I needed it most." Mia studied her with those sharp brown eyes, Sarah's eyes, always seeing too much. "My daddy's nice like that. He helps everybody." "Yes," Vivian said softly. "I'm learning that about him." The moment stretched, and Ryan felt something shift in the room, some invisible barrier crumbling. Then Mia reached out and patted Vivian awkwardly on the shoulder, the way she might comfort a sad stuffed animal. "It's okay to have a hard week," she announced. "Everybody has hard weeks. Miss Caroline says that's when you need chocolate the most." Despite everything, the exhaustion, the guilt, the absolute absurdity of the situation, Ryan felt a smile tugging at his lips. His daughter, the tiny therapist. Vivian's face did something complicated. Her mouth trembled, and for a horrifying moment, Ryan thought she might cry. But then she laughed instead, a short, surprised sound, like she'd forgotten that laughing was something she could do. "Miss Caroline sounds very wise," she managed. "She's my dance teacher. She knows everything about feelings and also pliés." Elaine appeared in the doorway then, having clearly given Mia a head start. She took in the scene with raised eyebrows, Ryan by the stove, his daughter comforting a disheveled stranger, pancakes burning on the griddle behind them, and said nothing. But her look spoke volumes. "Good morning, Elaine," Ryan said weakly. "Good morning, Ryan." Her tone was carefully neutral. "Mia wanted to come home, so I brought her over. I see you have company. This is Ms. Hale, my boss. She had car trouble last night." "Car trouble?" Elaine repeated the words with obvious skepticism. "At your house." "It's a long story." "I'm sure it is." Elaine softened slightly, her eyes going to Vivian. "Can I make you some coffee, dear? You look like you could use it." Vivian straightened up, smoothing her wrinkled blouse in a futile attempt at dignity. "Thank you, but I should be going. I've imposed on this family enough." "Nonsense. Sit down. Ryan, those pancakes are burning." Ryan swore under his breath and turned back to the stove, scraping the blackened remains into the trash. Behind him, he could hear Elaine shepherding everyone to the table, her natural authority overriding any objections. "Mia, help Ms. Hale find a seat. Ryan, start a fresh batch. I'll handle the coffee." And somehow, impossibly, they all ended up seated around Ryan's small kitchen table, his daughter, his boss, his neighbor, and himself, sharing a breakfast none of them had expected. Mia did most of the talking. She described her recital in excruciating detail. Every twirl, every step, every moment she'd looked for her father and found him missing. Ryan felt each word like a needle sliding under his skin, but he let her talk. She needed to process it, needed to express her disappointment, needed to know that her feelings were valid even if she was expected to forgive. Vivian listened with an intensity that surprised Ryan. She asked questions, real questions, not the polite non-questions adults usually offered children. What was the music like? How did it feel to dance in front of so many people? Was she nervous? Mia answered each one thoughtfully, and by the time the pancakes were gone, she had somehow decided that Vivian was an acceptable person. You should come to my next recital, Mia announced, syrup smeared across her chin. It's in the spring. I'm going to be a flower. Vivian glanced at Ryan, something uncertain in her expression. That's very kind, but I'm sure your father would rather. Daddy doesn't mind. Do you, Daddy? Ryan was caught off guard by the question. Sure. If Ms. Hale wants to come, she's welcome. Vivian's lips parted slightly like she was going to say something, but then Elaine stood up and started collecting plates. That's enough excitement for one morning. Mia, you need a bath. You smell like ice cream and sleep. Come on. Mia started to protest, then seemed to think better of it. She slid off her chair and stopped next to Vivian on her way out. I hope you feel better, she said, and I hope nobody makes you sad anymore. Then she was gone, following Elaine out of the kitchen, leaving Ryan alone with his boss in the sudden quiet. Neither of them spoke for a long moment. Ryan stared at his empty coffee cup. Vivian stared at the table. The morning light had grown stronger, flooding the kitchen with a brightness that felt almost aggressive. She's remarkable, Vivian finally said. Your daughter. She's my whole world. I can see that. Vivian paused, her fingers tracing patterns on the tablecloth. I never had children. Greg, my ex-husband, he didn't want them. Said they would interfere with our careers. She laughed bitterly. Funny, isn't it? I gave up the possibility of a family to focus on my marriage, and now I have neither. Ryan didn't know how to respond to that level of honesty, so he said nothing. I should go, Vivian said, pushing back from the table. I've taken up enough of your Saturday. I'll drive you to the office to get your keys. You don't have to. I want to. The words came out more forcefully than he intended, and Vivian looked at him with surprise. I mean, you shouldn't have to deal with ride services and logistics after the night you had. Let me help. It's the least I can do. Vivian studied him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then she nodded slowly. Okay. Thank you. The drive to the office was quiet. Saturday morning traffic was light, and they made it downtown in 20 minutes. The building looked different without the bustle of weekday activity. Empty. Somehow diminished. Just glass and steel without the humans to give it purpose. Ryan pulled into the parking garage and found a spot near the elevator. Vivian unbuckled her seatbelt but didn't immediately move to leave. Ryan, she said, still facing forward. Yeah? What happened last night, at the party, and after? I need you to know that it can't happen again. Ryan's stomach tightened. I understand. Not because I'm ashamed or because I want to pretend it didn't happen. She finally turned to look at him, and her eyes were serious. Because I'm your boss. Because there's a power dynamic that makes any personal relationship inappropriate. Because the company has policies, and I have a reputation, and you have a career that could be damaged by association with someone who clearly can't hold her liquor. My career is fine. Your career is what I say it is. The words were harsh, but her tone wasn't. I'm not trying to be cold, Ryan. I'm trying to be honest. You showed me extraordinary kindness last night, and I repaid you by making you miss your daughter's recital. The best thing I can do now, for both of us, is to make sure we maintain appropriate professional boundaries going forward. Ryan sat with that for a moment, turning it over in his mind. So, what does that mean? We pretend this never happened? We acknowledge that it happened, and we move on. I'll be your boss. You'll be my employee. And we'll both forget about pancakes and 7-year-old therapists and morning confessions. She said it like it was simple, like they could just close a door and lock it and never look back. But Ryan had seen her at 3 a.m., scared and vulnerable and utterly alone. He'd watched his daughter pat her shoulder and tell her it was okay to have hard weeks. He'd sat across from her at breakfast and glimpsed the person beneath the professional armor. You couldn't just forget something like that. Not completely. Okay, he said anyway, because there was nothing else to say. Professional boundaries. I understand. Vivian nodded once, sharply, and opened the car door. Cold air rushed in, carrying the smell of concrete and exhaust. Thank you, she said, 1 foot already on the ground. For everything. You're welcome. She hesitated, half in and half out of the car, like there was something else she wanted to say. Then she shook her head slightly and stepped out. I'll see you Monday, Carter. See you Monday, Ms. Hale. He watched her walk to the elevator, her spine straight, her stride purposeful despite yesterday's heels. She looked almost like her normal self, almost like the Ice Queen everyone knew and feared. But Ryan could see the cracks now, could see the way she held herself together through sheer force of will. The elevator doors opened and Vivian stepped inside without looking back. Ryan sat in the parking garage for a long time after she was gone, staring at the empty space where she'd been standing. Professional boundaries, appropriate distance, pretend it never happened. He could do that. He'd been pretending for 4 years now, pretending he wasn't lonely, pretending he wasn't exhausted, pretending that being a single father was fulfilling in all the ways it was supposed to be. What was one more layer of pretense on top of the rest? His phone buzzed with a text from Elaine. "Mia's asking for you. She wants to show you her recital on video." Ryan started the car and pulled out of the garage, leaving the office building behind. He had a daughter to apologize to, a video to watch, a life to keep living. Whatever had happened with Vivian Hale, whatever almost connection had formed in his kitchen over burned pancakes, it was over now. That's what he told himself anyway. The drive home felt longer than it should have. When Ryan walked through the front door, Mia was waiting on the couch with Elaine's tablet clutched in her hands. Her face was freshly scrubbed, her hair still damp from the bath, and she was wearing her favorite purple pajamas, even though it was almost noon. "Daddy, come watch!" Ryan sank onto the couch beside her, and she immediately crawled into his lap, the tablet balanced on her knees. Elaine had recorded the entire recital, 20 minutes of little girls in sparkly costumes twirling and jumping and occasionally bumping into each other. But Ryan only had eyes for Mia. She was in the front row, center stage, exactly where Miss Caroline had promised she would be. And she was radiant. There was no other word for it. She hit every mark, nailed every step, and when she did her big twirl, her face lit up with joy so pure it made Ryan's chest ache. "There, that's my best part." Mia jabbed her finger at the screen. "See how I didn't fall down?" "I see, Bug. You were perfect. Miss Caroline said I was the best twirler in the whole class." "I believe it." They watched the rest of the video in silence, Mia providing commentary on her classmates' performances with the brutal honesty of childhood. Sophie was good, but forgot to smile. Justin was the worst because he kept making faces. Emma fell down but got back up really fast. When it was over, Mia turned to look at him with those two perceptive eyes. "Why did you have to help that lady?" Ryan took a deep breath. "Because she was in trouble, and there was no one else to help her." "But what about me? I was in trouble too." "What do you mean?" Mia shrugged, picking at a loose thread on her pajama sleeve. "I was really scared. There were so many people watching, and I kept looking for you and you weren't there. And then I thought maybe something bad happened to you, like with Mommy, and I got really scared." The words hit Ryan like a truck. He gathered Mia closer, pressing his lips to the top of her head. "Oh, baby, I'm so sorry. I didn't think about how scary that must have been for you." "It's okay." Her voice was muffled against his chest. "Elaine said you were helping someone important. You're the most important person in my life. You know that, right?" Mia pulled back to look at him. "More important than work?" "More important than everything." "Promise?" Ryan held up his pinky. Mia hooked hers through it immediately, their sacred vow, unbreakable since she was 4 years old. "I promise," he said. "From now on, you come first, always." Mia smiled then, a real smile, not the cautious one she'd worn all morning, and Ryan felt something loosen in his chest. "Can we make cookies?" she asked, the crisis apparently resolved. "Elaine bought chocolate chips." "Yeah, Bug. We can make cookies." The rest of the weekend passed in a blur of flour and sugar and laughter. Ryan threw himself into dad mode with renewed determination, making up for his absence the way he always did, with time, attention, and an endless supply of chocolate chip cookies. He didn't think about Vivian, not when he was reading Mia her bedtime story, not when he was lying awake at 2 a.m., staring at the ceiling, not when he passed the guest room and caught a lingering trace of her perfume. Professional boundaries, appropriate distance. Moving on. He was good at this. He'd had plenty of practice. Sunday night came too quickly, and with it, the anxiety Ryan always felt before returning to work. He laid out his clothes for Monday, another button-down, another pair of khakis, the same uniform he'd been wearing for 6 years, and tried to prepare himself for what awaited. Vivian would be different at the office. Distant, Professional. She'd probably pretend she didn't remember most of Friday night, and he would let her because that was the arrangement they'd agreed to. It was better this way. Cleaner. Safer. So why did his chest hurt every time he thought about it? Ryan turned off the light and forced himself to sleep. Monday morning arrived gray and cold, with a steady drizzle that turned the commute into a crawl. Ryan dropped Mia at school, accepted her fierce hug with a promise to pick her up on time, and drove to the office with his coffee growing cold in the cup holder. The building looked the same as always, glass and steel and other people's ambitions, but something felt different as Ryan walked through the lobby. Something he couldn't quite name. He found out what it was the moment he stepped off the elevator. Dennis was waiting for him, practically bouncing with excitement. "Did you hear? Did you see the email?" "What email?" "Check your phone, man. Vivian got promoted. VP of Finance, effective immediately. They announced it this morning." Ryan's stomach dropped. He pulled out his phone and found the company-wide announcement in his inbox, complete with a formal headshot of Vivian looking polished and powerful, and nothing like the woman who'd stood in his kitchen 2 days ago. "Please join me in congratulating Vivian Hale on her promotion to Vice President of Finance." "VP," Dennis repeated, shaking his head in disbelief. "Can you imagine? Ice Queen with even more power? We're all doomed." Ryan stared at the photo on his screen. Vivian's expression was controlled, professional, the mask firmly back in place. He wondered if anyone else could see the cracks the way he could. "Good for her," he said finally. "Good for her? Dude, she's going to be insufferable now. More authority, more demands, more, 'I need this report by EOD, Carter.'" Dennis did a poor imitation of Vivian's voice. "I'm telling you, this is bad news for everyone below her." Ryan thought about pancakes and apologies, and a 7-year-old girl telling a powerful woman it was okay to have hard weeks. "Maybe she'll surprise you," he said. Dennis snorted. "Yeah, and maybe I'll win the lottery." The morning passed slowly. Ryan buried himself in spreadsheets and tried not to watch for Vivian on the floor. She was probably in meetings all day, handling the logistics of her new position. He wouldn't see her. There was no reason to see her. At 11:47 a.m., an email landed in his inbox. From Vivian Hale. Subject: No subject. Carter, I wanted to personally thank you for completing the quarterly analysis under such tight deadline. Your work was excellent as always. I'm recommending you for the senior analyst bonus this quarter. I also want to reiterate my apology for Friday evening. Your professionalism and discretion are appreciated more than I can express. V. Hale. Ryan read the email 3 times. It was perfectly composed, perfectly appropriate, perfectly impersonal. There was nothing in it that anyone could question, no hidden meanings, no lingering connections. Just a boss thanking an employee for a job well done. He should have been relieved. He typed back a response. "Thank you, Ms. Hale. Congratulations on the promotion. Well deserved." The reply came within minutes. "Thank you, Carter." And that was it. Professional, distant, exactly what they'd agreed to. Ryan stared at the exchange for a long moment, then closed his email and went back to work. The rest of the day was unremarkable. Meetings, spreadsheets, the usual Monday chaos. Ryan left at 5:15, picked up Mia from after-school care, and drove home through the drizzle. They had chicken nuggets for dinner because he was too tired to cook anything real. Mia did her homework at the kitchen table, while Ryan sorted through bills, and they watched 2 episodes of her favorite cartoon before bedtime. "Daddy?" Mia asked as he tucked her in. "Yeah, bug? Is the sad lady feeling better?" Ryan's hand stilled on her blanket. "What sad lady?" "The one from breakfast. Ms. Hale. She looked really sad." "I don't know, honey. I hope so." Mia nodded thoughtfully. "Me too. She seemed nice, even though she was sad, like she just needed somebody to be nice to her." "That's very perceptive of you." "What's perceptive?" "It means you notice things that other people miss." Mia considered this. "Is that good?" "It's very good. It means you're going to grow up to be someone who understands people." "Like you?" Ryan smiled and kissed her forehead. "Better than me, I hope." He turned off the light and stood in her doorway for a moment, watching the rise and fall of her breathing. His daughter. His whole world. The reason he got up every morning and kept going even when everything felt impossible. In the hallway, His phone buzzed with a text. He pulled it out, expecting Elaine or maybe Dennis with some new piece of office gossip. It was from a number he didn't recognize. "This is Vivian Hale. I got your number from the company directory. I hope that's not inappropriate. I wanted to say congratulations on the bonus recommendation going through. You should see it in your next paycheck." Ryan stared at the message, his heart doing something complicated in his chest. "Also, I wanted to thank Mia for her kindness on Saturday. Would you and she like to celebrate the new position with ice cream sometime? No alcohol, I promise." He read it twice, 3 times. Tried to reconcile the formal email from this morning with this tentative, almost nervous text. Professional boundaries, she'd said. Appropriate distance. But this wasn't about work. This was about ice cream. About a little girl who'd told a stranger it was okay to have hard weeks. This was something else entirely. Ryan looked back at Mia's door, then down at his phone. He typed back, "She'd like that. So would I." The response came immediately. "How about Sunday? There's a place near the waterfront that has 32 flavors. I hear they're all acceptable." Ryan smiled despite himself. Sunday works. And just like that, the door Vivian had tried to close cracked open again. Just a sliver, just enough light to see by. Neither of them knew where it would lead. But for the first time in longer than he could remember, Ryan found himself looking forward to finding out. Sunday arrived wrapped in autumn gold, the kind of October morning that made Portland look like it belonged on a postcard. Leaves scattered across sidewalks in shades of amber and rust, and the air carried that particular crispness that promised sweater weather and hot chocolate and all the comfortable rituals of fall. Ryan stood in front of his closet for 20 minutes, which was 19 minutes longer than he'd ever spent choosing clothes in his life. "It's just ice cream," he told himself. "Just a casual thank you from a colleague. Nothing to overthink." But his hands kept reaching for shirts and putting them back, rejecting options for reasons he couldn't articulate. Too formal. Too casual. Too much like he was trying too hard. Too much like he wasn't trying at all. "Daddy, why are you staring at your clothes?" He turned to find Mia in the doorway, already dressed in her favorite pink dress with the butterfly print, the one she saved for special occasions. "I'm trying to decide what to wear." "Just wear the blue one. You always look nice in blue." Ryan pulled out the navy Henley she'd indicated. "You think so?" "Mommy said blue was your color, remember?" The words landed softly, the way mentions of Sarah always did now. Less like a wound being reopened, more like pressing on a bruise that had mostly healed. "Yeah," Ryan said quietly. "I remember." He pulled on the Henley and turned to face his daughter. "How do I look?" Mia studied him with exaggerated seriousness, walking a slow circle around him like a general inspecting troops. "Good," she finally pronounced. "But you need to fix your hair. It's doing the sticky-uppy thing in the back." Ryan ran his hand over his head, feeling the cowlick that had plagued him since childhood. "Better?" "A little." Mia grabbed his hand and tugged him toward the bathroom. "Come on, I'll help." 5 minutes later, his hair had been thoroughly attacked with water and a comb, and Mia had declared him acceptable for public viewing. They headed downstairs, where Ryan's keys and wallet waited on the table by the door. "Are you excited?" he asked as they walked to the car. "For ice cream?" "Obviously." Mia climbed into her booster seat and buckled herself in with practiced efficiency. "I'm going to get 3 scoops. Chocolate, strawberry, and cookie dough." "That's a lot of ice cream." "Ms. Hale said 32 flavors, Daddy. 3 scoops is barely trying." Ryan laughed despite the nerves tangling in his stomach. His daughter had a point. The drive to the waterfront took 15 minutes, and Mia filled every second with chatter. About school, about Sophie's new puppy, about the Halloween costume she'd decided on, a butterfly to match her favorite dress. Ryan let her voice wash over him, grateful for the distraction from his own spiraling thoughts. What was he doing? What was he expecting? Vivian had been clear about boundaries. This was just ice cream. A thank you. Nothing more. A chance for her to properly apologize to Mia for the missed recital. That was all. So why did his palms keep sweating? The ice cream shop materialized ahead, a cheerful blue building with a striped awning and a line already forming out the door. Ryan found a parking spot and helped Mia out of her seat, her hand immediately finding his as they walked toward the entrance. He saw Vivian before she saw them. She was standing near the door, dressed in clothes Ryan had never seen her wear. Jeans that actually fit like jeans instead of professional slacks, a cream-colored sweater that looked impossibly soft, her auburn hair loose around her shoulders instead of pulled back in its usual severe bun. She looked younger, softer, almost nervous. Then she spotted them, and her face did something complicated. Relief and anxiety, and something else flickering across her features in rapid succession. "Hi," she said as they approached. "Hi," Ryan replied. Mia had no patience for adult awkwardness. "Ms. Hale, I'm going to get 3 scoops. What are you getting?" Vivian's posture relaxed slightly at Mia's enthusiasm. "I haven't decided yet. What do you recommend?" "The cookie dough is really good, and the strawberry, but not the mint chocolate chip because it tastes like toothpaste." "Noted. No mint chocolate chip." They joined the line together, Mia positioning herself between the 2 adults and immediately launching into a detailed explanation of ice cream hierarchy. Vivian listened with apparent fascination, asking follow-up questions that made Mia preen with importance. Ryan watched them interact and felt something shift in his chest, a door creaking open, letting light into a room that had been dark for too long. "She's been talking about this all week," he said quietly to Vivian, while Mia debated the merits of sprinkles versus hot fudge. "I hope that's okay. I wasn't sure if texting you was appropriate, but I wanted to do something, to make up for, well," she gestured vaguely, "everything." "You don't have to make up for anything." "I feel like I do." Vivian's voice dropped lower. "I keep thinking about that morning, about her asking if you were okay, if something bad had happened to you. I didn't realize—" She stopped, shook her head. "I didn't realize how much my actions could affect people I'd never even considered." Before Ryan could respond, they reached the front of the line. Mia ordered her 3 scoops with the confidence of a seasoned professional, then supervised closely as the teenage employee assembled her masterpiece. Vivian got 2 scoops of coffee and dark chocolate, sophisticated flavors, Mia declared with approval, and Ryan stuck with his usual vanilla. "Vanilla?" Vivian raised an eyebrow. "That's very boring." "I was going to say dependable." "Is that better or worse than boring?" Vivian smiled, a real smile, not the corporate one he'd seen in her promotion photo. "Better, definitely better." They found a table by the window, sunlight streaming across the worn wooden surface. Mia attacked her ice cream with enthusiasm, somehow managing to get chocolate on her nose within the first 30 seconds. Ryan handed her a napkin without comment. This was a familiar battle he'd long since surrendered. "So," Vivian said, her spoon hovering over her cup, "congratulations are apparently in order for me." "The promotion. Yeah, I saw the announcement." "It's strange. I've been working toward VP for 5 years, and now that I have it—" She trailed off, stirring her ice cream absently. "Doesn't feel the way I thought it would." "How did you think it would feel?" "I don't know. Triumphant? Vindicated?" Vivian shook her head. "Instead, it just feels like more responsibility, more pressure, more reasons to be at the office at midnight." "Is that what you want? To be at the office at midnight?" The question seemed to catch her off guard. She looked at him, really looked, the way she had that morning in his kitchen, and something shifted in her expression. "No," she admitted. "I don't think it is. Not anymore." Mia looked up from her ice cream, cherry-red lips pursed thoughtfully. "Why do you work so much? Don't you have anybody to play with?" Ryan started to redirect the conversation, but Vivian held up a hand. "It's a fair question." She turned to face Mia directly, giving the 7-year-old the same respect she'd give a boardroom full of executives. "I work a lot because for a long time work was the only thing I had, but I'm starting to think maybe I was wrong about that." "About what?" "About work being the only thing that matters." Vivian glanced at Ryan, then back to Mia. "Your dad seems to have figured out something I'm still learning, that some things are more important than deadlines and promotions." Mia nodded sagely, as if this were obvious. "Daddy says I'm more important than everything." "He's right. He also says pancakes are the most important meal." "He might be right about that too." They talked for an hour, then 2. The ice cream disappeared, replaced by cups of hot chocolate that Mia insisted they order because You can't have ice cream without something warm to balance it out. Ryan had no idea where she'd gotten that philosophy, but he suspected Miss Caroline was involved. The conversation flowed easier than Ryan had expected. Vivian asked about Mia's dance classes, her school, her friends. She shared stories about her own childhood, growing up in Boston, the daughter of two professors who expected nothing less than perfection. She'd been valedictorian of her high school, top of her class at Harvard Business School, climbing the corporate ladder with single-minded determination. I thought if I just worked hard enough, I could have everything, she said, her hands wrapped around her mug. Career, marriage, success. I thought I could control it all. What changed? Vivian was quiet for a moment. I came home early one day about 8 months ago. I'd been in Seattle for a conference that got canceled, and I thought I'd surprise Greg. We were going to have dinner together for the first time in weeks. She laughed, but there was no humor in it. I surprised him all right, found him in our bed with his assistant, a 24-year-old named Brittany who dots her I's with little hearts. I'm sorry. Don't be. It was the best thing that could have happened to me. Vivian set down her mug. Not because I wanted my marriage to end, I didn't, but because it forced me to see what I'd been ignoring, that I'd built my whole life around someone who didn't actually love me, who saw me as a stepping stone, not a partner. Mia had finished her hot chocolate and was drawing patterns in the leftover foam with her spoon, half listening to the adult conversation. Do you miss him? Ryan asked. Your husband? Ex-husband. And no. Vivian's voice was steady. I miss who I thought he was. I miss the future I thought we were building together. But the actual person? The man who lied to me for 3 years? She shook her head. Him I don't miss at all. That's healthy, I think, being able to separate the two. Is it healthy, or is it just compartmentalization? Vivian smiled wryly. My therapist says I'm excellent at putting things in boxes. Apparently that's not always a compliment. Ryan thought about his own boxes. Sarah's pillow still on the bed, her glasses on the nightstand, the closet door he never opened. Maybe he wasn't so different from Vivian after all. Daddy, Mia interrupted. I have to go to the bathroom. Okay, Bug, I can go by myself, I'm 7. The bathroom's right there, Vivian pointed to a door 10 feet away. I'll watch the door. Mia slid out of her chair with exaggerated independence and marched toward the bathroom, leaving Ryan and Vivian alone for the first time since that morning in his kitchen. The silence between them was different now, charged with something Ryan couldn't name. Vivian was watching him with an expression he couldn't read, her fingers tracing the rim of her mug. Can I ask you something? She said. Sure. Why did you help me? That night at the party, you didn't have to. You had somewhere else to be, someone who needed you more. And I'd never been anything but demanding and difficult to you, so why? Ryan considered the question. He'd asked himself the same thing a dozen times over the past week. Because you needed help, he said finally. And because I know what it feels like to be alone and overwhelmed and have no one reach out. When your wife died? He nodded slowly. After the accident, I was a mess. Barely functional. I had a 2-year-old daughter who needed me to be okay, and I was anything but. And the people I thought would be there for me, most of them disappeared. Didn't know what to say, I guess, or didn't want to deal with someone else's grief. That's terrible. It was. But a few people stepped up. My neighbor, Elaine, a guy from work who brought me meals for a month. Sarah's sister, who flew in from Seattle and stayed until I could function on my own again. Ryan met Vivian's eyes. Those people saved my life. They saw me at my worst and didn't run away. So when I saw you at the party looking like you were drowning, I couldn't just walk past, not after what others did for me. Vivian's eyes had gone bright, and she blinked rapidly. Thank you for telling me that. Thank you for asking. The bathroom door opened and Mia emerged, carefully drying her hands on her dress. Did you flush? Ryan asked automatically. Daddy, of course I flushed. I'm not a baby. Just checking. Vivian laughed, that surprised sound again, like joy caught her off guard, and something in Ryan's chest cracked open a little wider. They left the ice cream shop as the afternoon shadows started to lengthen. Outside, the waterfront was bustling with Sunday strollers and joggers and families enjoying the last warm days before winter arrived. Mia spotted a playground across the street and immediately began lobbying. "Please, Daddy, just for a little bit. Ms. Hale can push me on the swings." "I don't think Ms. Hale—" "I'd love to," Vivian said. Ryan blinked at her. "You don't have to." "I want to." She smiled at Mia. "I haven't pushed anyone on a swing since I was your age. Let's see if I remember how." They crossed to the playground, Mia already running ahead to claim the best swing. Ryan and Vivian followed at a slower pace, their shoulders almost but not quite touching. "You're good with her," Ryan said quietly. "She makes it easy. She's so open, so unguarded." Vivian shook her head. "I wasn't like that at her age. I was already learning how to perform, how to be what other people expected instead of who I actually was." "And who were you actually?" Vivian didn't answer right away. They reached the swings, where Mia was waiting impatiently, and Vivian took her position behind the seat. "Scared," she finally said, so quietly Ryan almost missed it. "I was scared. Still am, most days." "Of what?" "Of not being enough. Of being too much. Of losing everything I worked for." She gave the swing a push, and Mia shrieked with delight. "Of never being the kind of person someone could actually love." The confession hung in the air between them, heavy with vulnerability. "That's not true," Ryan said. Vivian kept pushing, kept her eyes on Mia soaring through the air. "You don't know that. I know you showed up today. I know you asked genuine questions and actually listened to the answers. I know my daughter, who has excellent instincts, by the way, thinks you're wonderful." He paused. "That's enough to convince me you're worth knowing." Vivian turned to look at him then, her hands pausing on the swing. Mia sailed forward without her, pumping her legs to keep the momentum going. "Ryan," Vivian said, and his name in her mouth sounded different than it ever had before. "What are we doing here?" "Getting ice cream, pushing swings." "That's not what I mean, and you know it." He did know. He'd been asking himself the same question since that text arrived on his phone. "I don't know," he admitted. "I just know that when I'm with you, I feel like maybe I don't have to have everything figured out. Like maybe it's okay to be scared and uncertain and making it up as I go along." "That's terrifying." "Yeah," he agreed. "It really is." Mia had slowed herself down and was watching them with undisguised curiosity. "Why are you both just standing there? You're supposed to push me." The moment broke, and they both laughed. Genuine laughter, the kind that comes from recognition rather than humor. "Sorry, Bug," Ryan said, taking over pushing duty. "We got distracted." Grown-ups always get distracted. Mia pumped her legs harder. "It's very inefficient." "Inefficient?" Vivian raised an eyebrow. "That's a big word." "My teacher says it means when things take too long for no reason. Like when Daddy stares at his phone for 10 minutes instead of making breakfast. I don't do that." "You do, Daddy, every morning." Vivian was clearly trying not to laugh. "She's got you there." "Traitors," Ryan muttered. "I'm surrounded by traitors." They stayed at the playground until the sun started sinking toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Mia had graduated from swings to the climbing structure to the slide, with Ryan and Vivian following her lead like overgrown playmates. At some point, Ryan realized he'd been smiling for hours. His face actually ached from it, the unfamiliar exercise of sustained happiness. "We should probably head home," he said reluctantly as Mia yawned for the third time. "Someone's about to crash." "I'm not tired," Mia protested, even as her eyes drooped. "Of course you're not." Ryan scooped her up, and she immediately wrapped her arms around his neck, resting her head on his shoulder. Vivian walked them to the parking lot, her hands in her pockets, her expression soft in the fading light. "Thank you," she said when they reached Ryan's car. "For today. For letting me crash your Sunday." "You didn't crash anything. You made it better." Vivian's lips parted like she wanted to say something, but Mia stirred in Ryan's arms. "Ms. Hale?" "Yes, sweetheart?" "Will you come to my recital, the spring one? You said maybe, but I want you to come for real." Vivian looked at Ryan, something uncertain in her expression. "She'd love to have you there," he said. "So would I." The uncertainty gave way to something warmer. "Then I'll be there. Front row, if I can manage it." Mia smiled sleepily and burrowed deeper into Ryan's shoulder. Good. Daddy can't miss it if you're watching him. The innocent words landed with unexpected weight. Vivian's eyes met Ryan's over his daughter's head, and something passed between them, an understanding, maybe, or the beginning of one. I'll see you at work tomorrow, Vivian said. Yeah, see you tomorrow. She turned to walk to her own car, then stopped and looked back. Ryan? Yeah? I'm glad you helped me. That night at the party. Her voice was steady, but her eyes were bright. I know I said it can't happen again. The drinking, the crisis, all of it. And it won't. But I'm glad it happened at least once. Because it led to this. This? She gestured vaguely, at him, at Mia, at the fading sunset and the playground and the ice cream shop in the distance. This, whatever this is, I'm glad. Then she was gone, walking across the parking lot, getting into a silver BMW that probably cost more than Ryan made in 6 months. He watched until she pulled away, her taillights disappearing into the evening traffic. Daddy? Mia murmured. Yeah, Bug? I like her. Me too, Ryan said quietly. Me too. The drive home was peaceful, Mia asleep in her car seat within minutes. Ryan let the silence settle around him, replaying the day in his mind, the ice cream, the hot chocolate, the confessions and questions and quiet moments that had somehow added up to something significant. He thought about Sarah. He thought about her every day, but tonight it was different, not the sharp grief of the early years, or even the dull ache that had become his constant companion. Instead, it was something softer, a memory of love rather than a reminder of loss. Would Sarah have approved of Vivian? The question felt strange, almost inappropriate, but he couldn't help wondering what she would have thought of this woman who had appeared in their kitchen wearing borrowed clothes and carrying the weight of her own broken heart. Sarah had always been better at reading people than Ryan was. She would have seen past Vivian's armor immediately, would have known exactly how to draw out the warmth beneath the ice. She would have probably invited Vivian over for dinner within 5 minutes of meeting her. It's okay, Ryan whispered to the empty car, to the ghost of his wife, to himself. It's okay to let someone in. He didn't know if he believed it, but he was starting to want to. At home, he carried Mia inside and put her to bed without waking her, a feat that always made him feel like a superhero. He brushed the hair from her face and pressed a kiss to her forehead. Sweet dreams, Bug. In his own bedroom, Ryan sat on the edge of the bed and looked at Sarah's pillow. He reached out and touched it, fingers tracing the familiar cotton. I met someone, he said quietly. It's complicated, and I don't know what's going to happen, but she's real, and she's kind underneath all the armor, and Mia likes her. He paused. I think you would have liked her too. The room was silent, of course. Sarah wasn't there to answer, would never be there to answer. But Ryan felt something ease in his chest anyway. Permission, maybe, or just peace. He lay down and, for the first time in a long while, fell asleep without replaying all the ways he'd failed. Monday at the office was different. Ryan noticed it the moment he stepped off the elevator. The energy had shifted somehow. People were buzzing about Vivian's promotion, speculating about what changes she might make, wondering if the new VP would be even more demanding than the old director. She's already requested a full audit of all department budgets, Dennis reported gleefully. Anderson from accounting nearly had a stroke. Ryan just nodded and went to his desk. He didn't want to participate in the office gossip, didn't want to hear people dissect the woman he'd watched push his daughter on a swing yesterday. At 10:30, an email appeared in his inbox. From Vivian Hale. Subject, Meeting Carter. I'd like to discuss a project I'm developing. My office, 2 p.m. V. Hale, professional. Distant. Exactly as she should be during work hours. But Ryan noticed she'd typed his name without the Mr. prefix she used with everyone else. A small thing, invisible to anyone watching. But he noticed. At 2 p.m., he knocked on her office door. Come in. Vivian's office was on the executive floor now, a corner suite with floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the city. She was sitting behind a massive mahogany desk, looking every inch the vice president in a charcoal suit and pearl earrings. The transformation from Sunday's casual warmth was so complete, it almost gave Ryan whiplash. Please sit, she said, gesturing to the chair across from her. He sat. She shuffled papers for a moment, not meeting his eyes. The project I mentioned is a reorganization of the financial reporting structure. I want to streamline how data flows between departments, reduce redundancy, and improve accuracy. I'm forming a task force, and I'd like you to be part of it. Me? Your work on the quarterly analysis was exceptional. You have an eye for detail that most analysts lack, and frankly, she finally looked up, and for a moment the professional mask slipped. I trust you. The words hung in the air between them. I'd be honored, Ryan said. Good. The first meeting is Thursday at 3 p.m. I'll send you the preliminary documentation this afternoon. Understood. Silence stretched between them. Ryan started to rise, assuming the meeting was over. Ryan. He paused, halfway out of the chair. I want to thank you again. For Sunday. Vivian's voice was lower now, meant only for him. It was the best day I've had in a very long time. For me, too. She nodded once, sharply, and the VP was back. That's all, Carter. See you Thursday. Ryan left her office with something warm spreading through his chest. The weeks that followed established a rhythm. At work, they were professional, proper, maintaining the boundaries Vivian had insisted upon. She was his boss, more than that now, with her elevated position, and they couldn't afford even a hint of impropriety. But outside work, slowly, carefully, something else was growing. Texts arrived on his phone in the evenings. Never during business hours, never anything that could be misconstrued. Questions about Mia's day. Recommendations for books Vivian was reading. Observations about the changing seasons or the absurdity of corporate life. And every few weeks, there was ice cream. It became their ritual. Sundays, when Vivian wasn't traveling for work, and Ryan wasn't drowning in household tasks. They would meet at the waterfront shop, Mia always getting her 3 scoops, Vivian trying new flavors at Mia's insistence, Ryan sticking stubbornly to vanilla. It's dependable, he said when Vivian teased him about it. It's boring, she countered. You said dependable was better than boring. I'm reconsidering my position. Mia watched these exchanges with undisguised delight, her eyes bouncing between them like she was watching a tennis match. Ryan knew people at work were starting to notice. The way Vivian smiled when she saw him in the hallway, the way she lingered after meetings when he was in the room. Dennis had started making pointed comments that Ryan deflected with practiced ease. There's nothing going on, he said, and it was technically true. They hadn't crossed any lines, hadn't held hands or kissed or done anything that couldn't be explained by professional camaraderie or innocent friendship. But the space between them had grown smaller, the silences more comfortable, the looks longer and more loaded with things neither of them was ready to say. It was terrifying and exhilarating, and nothing Ryan had expected to feel again. One Sunday in late November, they walked along the waterfront while Mia fed the ducks with stale bread Vivian had brought specifically for the purpose. She's asking about Christmas, Ryan said, watching his daughter scatter crumbs with abandon. What she's going to get, whether Santa is real, the usual interrogation. What do you tell her? About Santa? The truth, mostly. That the magic of Christmas is about love and giving, and Santa represents the best of that magic. She's too smart for the literal version, but she appreciates the mythology. Vivian was quiet for a moment. I never had that. The mythology. My parents didn't believe in lying to children, even about harmless things. Christmas was always just a day. Presents exchanged with calculated precision. That sounds lonely. It was. Vivian wrapped her arms around herself against the November chill. I think that's why I threw myself into work. At least at the office, I knew the rules. Exceed expectations, get promoted, acquire more responsibility. It was a system I understood. And now? Now, I'm not sure the system is worth understanding. She turned to look at him, her eyes reflecting the gray November sky. I've been thinking about what you said, about some things being more important than deadlines and promotions. Have you figured out what those things are? I'm starting to. Her gaze drifted to Mia, who was now trying to convince a particularly bold duck to eat from her hand. I'm starting to think maybe I've been climbing the wrong ladder. Ryan didn't know what to say to that, so he just stood beside her as the wind picked up and the clouds rolled in. Ryan, Vivian said quietly. What are we doing? It was the same question she'd asked at the playground months ago, but this time it felt different, more urgent, more real. I don't know, he admitted. I just know I don't want to stop. Neither do I. She took a breath, steadying herself. But I need you to understand something. I'm not good at this. Relationships, vulnerability, letting people see the parts of me I've spent 40 years trying to hide. You think I am? I've been a single father for 4 years, Vivian. The last time I went on a date, Obama was president. That surprised a laugh out of her. That's not reassuring. It's not meant to be. I'm terrified. I'm terrified of moving too fast and scaring you away. I'm terrified of moving too slow and missing my chance. I'm terrified of what Mia would feel if this doesn't work out. And I'm terrified of what I would feel. Then why do you keep showing up? Ryan looked at her, really looked, the way he'd been trying not to for months. At the auburn hair whipping in the wind, at the blue eyes that held so much more than she wanted the world to see, at the careful walls she'd built and the cracks that had started to form. Because you're worth being terrified for, he said simply. Vivian's breath caught. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Then Mia came running back, a triumphant grin on her face. The duck ate from my hand, did you see? He ate right from my hand. The moment shattered, reality rushing back in. Ryan caught his daughter as she launched herself at him, her cheeks red from the cold and her eyes bright with excitement. I saw, Bug. That was amazing. Can we get hot chocolate now? I'm freezing. Sure, let's get hot chocolate. They walked toward the cafe, Mia between them, chattering about ducks and bread and the mysteries of bird behavior. But Ryan felt Vivian's eyes on him, felt the weight of everything unspoken between them. They weren't there yet, weren't ready to cross the line they'd been dancing around for months. But they were closer, so much closer than they'd been that morning in his kitchen when she'd asked if they'd slept together and he'd sworn nothing had happened. Nothing had happened then. But something was happening now. Something slow and careful and terrifying and wonderful. And for the first time since Sarah, Ryan found himself hoping for more. December arrived with a vengeance, bringing snow that blanketed Portland in white and transformed the city into a winter wonderland that existed only in holiday movies and nostalgic memories. Ryan had forgotten how beautiful snow could be when you weren't worried about driving in it or shoveling it or keeping a 7-year-old from eating it directly off the ground. Mia, predictably, was beside herself with excitement. Daddy, look! Snow angels! I'm making snow angels! She was in fact making something that looked more like a snow blob with arms, but Ryan didn't have the heart to correct her. He stood on the front porch with his coffee, watching his daughter roll around in the yard with the kind of pure joy that only children and golden retrievers seemed capable of experiencing. His phone buzzed in his pocket. Vivian. How much snow did you get? Ryan. Enough for Mia to lose her mind. She's been outside since 6 a.m. Vivian. That sounds exhausting. For you, I mean. Ryan. Coffee helps. Vivian. I have something that might help more. Can you come by my place this afternoon? I have something for Mia. Ryan stared at the message, his thumb hovering over the keyboard. They'd never been to Vivian's apartment. All their meetings had been in public spaces, the ice cream shop, the waterfront, the playground. Neutral territory where nothing could escalate, where the boundaries remained clear. This felt different. This felt like an invitation across a line they'd been carefully not crossing. Ryan. What time? Vivian. 3? I'll text you the address. He tucked the phone back in his pocket and took a long sip of coffee. In the yard, Mia had abandoned her snow angel and was now attempting to build a snowman with limited success. Daddy, I need help. His head keeps falling off. Ryan set down his mug and stepped off the porch, his boots crunching in the fresh snow. Okay, Bug, let me show you the secret. They worked together for an hour, packing snow and shaping it until a respectable snowman stood in the front yard, complete with a carrot nose and buttons made from the pebbles Mia collected from the driveway. Ryan found an old scarf in the hall closet, one of Sarah's, he realized with a pang, and wrapped it around the snowman's neck. He's perfect, Mia declared. We should name him. What do you want to call him? Mia studied the snowman with intense concentration. Mr. Frosty McSnowface. That's very creative. Sophie named her snowman Steve. I wanted something better. Mission accomplished. They went inside to warm up with hot chocolate, and Ryan casually mentioned they had plans for the afternoon. We're going to visit Ms. Hale. She has something for you. Mia's eyes went wide. A present? Is it a Christmas present? I don't know. Maybe. Is she coming to Christmas? Can she come to Christmas? Elaine always comes to Christmas. Ms. Hale should come too. Oh, Ryan hadn't thought that far ahead. Christmas had always been a quiet affair since Sarah's death. Just him, Mia, and Elaine, eating too much food and watching holiday movies until Mia fell asleep on the couch. The thought of adding Vivian to that intimate circle felt both wonderful and terrifying. We'll see, he said, which was parent speak for, I have no idea and need time to figure it out. At 2:30, they bundled up and headed to the car. Vivian's address led them to a high-rise in the Pearl District, the same building Ryan had driven her to that night in October, though he hadn't paid much attention to it then. The lobby was all marble and glass, with a doorman who nodded politely as they entered. We're here to see Vivian Hale, Ryan said, feeling suddenly underdressed in his jeans and winter coat. Of course, sir. She's expecting you. 20th floor, apartment 2001. The elevator was mirrored on all sides, and Mia spent the ride making faces at her reflection while Ryan tried to calm his nerves. This was fine. This was just a visit. Vivian had something for Mia. Nothing complicated about that. Except everything about this was complicated, and he knew it. The elevator opened directly into a small foyer with a single door. Before Ryan could knock, it swung open to reveal Vivian in jeans and an oversized sweater, her feet bare, her hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. You found it, she said, and her smile was the real one, the one Ryan had learned to distinguish from her professional version. Ms. Hale! Mia pushed past Ryan and into the apartment. Daddy said you have something for me. Mia Manners, Ryan called after her. Please and thank you, Mia added without slowing down. Vivian laughed and stepped aside to let Ryan in. She's enthusiastic. I like it. The apartment was not what Ryan had expected. He'd imagined sleek, modern furniture, everything in shades of gray and white, the kind of space that looked more like a magazine spread than a home. Instead, he found warmth, bookshelves overflowing with novels, a well-worn leather couch, photographs on the walls, a kitchen that actually looked used. It's different from what I pictured, he admitted. What did you picture? Something colder, more corporate. Vivian's expression flickered. That was the old apartment, the one I shared with Greg. After the divorce, I needed something that felt like mine. So I started over. Mia had found her way to the living room, where a large box sat wrapped in shiny red paper. Is that for me? She asked, practically vibrating with excitement. It is. Go ahead, open it. Mia tore into the paper with the ferocity of a wild animal, revealing a large cardboard box underneath. She pried open the flaps and gasped. A telescope! Ryan moved closer to look. It was a children's telescope. Not a toy, but a real one. The kind that actually showed you stars and planets instead of just colored blurs. I remembered you said you were interested in space, Vivian said, kneeling beside Mia. Your dad mentioned you've been asking questions about the stars. I want to see Saturn's rings. Mia was already pulling pieces out of the box, trying to figure out how to assemble them. And the moon, and maybe aliens. I'm not sure about aliens, Vivian said, but Saturn's rings we can definitely manage. Ryan watched them together, his daughter and this woman who had appeared in their lives so unexpectedly, and felt something shift in his chest. Vivian was patient with Mia's questions, explaining how the telescope worked, helping her fit the pieces together, treating her curiosity with genuine respect. This was not the Ice Queen. This was not the untouchable executive who made grown men cry in budget meetings. This was someone else entirely, someone soft and warm and present in a way Ryan hadn't expected. Ryan, come help, Vivian called. I think I put this part on backwards. He joined them on the floor, their shoulders brushing as they worked together to assemble the telescope. Mia provided running commentary and occasional assistance, mostly in the form of handing over pieces and asking when they would be done. By the time they finished, the sky outside had darkened to a deep purple. We need to wait for full dark, Vivian said, but I have hot chocolate and cookies to pass the time, if that's okay with your dad. Mia looked at Ryan with pleading eyes. Hot chocolate and cookies sound perfect, he said. They moved to the kitchen, where Vivian produced homemade sugar cookies in the shape of stars and moons. You made these? Ryan asked, surprised. I've been learning to bake. My therapist suggested I needed hobbies that weren't work-related. Vivian handed Mia a cookie shaped like a crescent moon. Turns out I'm not terrible at it. These are really good, Mia announced through a mouthful of cookie. Don't talk with your mouth full, Bug. Mia swallowed dramatically. These are really good, Ms. Hale. They sat at Vivian's kitchen table, drinking hot chocolate and eating cookies while the darkness deepened outside. The conversation flowed easily, Mia talking about school and snow and Mr. Frosty McSnowface, Vivian asking questions, Ryan watching them both with a feeling he was afraid to name. At some point, Mia wandered back to the telescope, trying to peer through the eyepiece, even though it wasn't properly aimed yet. She's wonderful, Vivian said quietly once they were alone. She's my everything. I know. Vivian's hand found his on the table, her fingers interlacing with his. It was the first time they'd touched like this, intentionally, intimately, and Ryan felt the contact like an electric current running through his whole body. Vivian, he started, I know we said we'd keep things separate, professional boundaries and all that. Her thumb traced small circles on the back of his hand. But I'm tired of pretending, Ryan. I'm tired of acting like this is just friendship when we both know it's more. What do you want it to be? She was quiet for a moment, her eyes searching his face. I want it to be real. I want to stop being afraid of what might happen and start finding out what could happen. I want... She stopped, laughed at herself. I want Sunday mornings and ice cream and watching your daughter grow up. I want to be part of something instead of always standing on the outside looking in. That's a lot. Too much? Ryan turned his hand over, clasping hers properly. No, it's exactly right. Daddy! Ms. Hale! I can see the moon! The moment broke, but not in a way that felt like loss. They both laughed and rose from the table, moving to where Mia was pressed against the telescope, one eye squeezed shut. Let me adjust this, Vivian said, tweaking the angle slightly. There. Now look. Mia looked, and her entire face transformed with wonder. It's so close, I can see the craters and everything. Ryan bent to look through the eyepiece. The moon filled his vision, impossibly detailed, impossibly beautiful. He'd seen pictures, of course, but this was different. This was real, immediate, something he was experiencing instead of just observing. That's incredible, he breathed. Let me try again. Mia pushed him aside with the casual brutality of childhood, reclaiming her position at the telescope. Vivian moved to stand beside Ryan, their shoulders touching. Worth the trip? Worth everything. She turned to look at him, her face half illuminated by the light from the kitchen, and Ryan made a decision. He'd been standing at the edge for months, too afraid to jump, too afraid to fall. But standing there with the moon outside the window and his daughter's joy filling the room and this woman beside him who had somehow become essential to his happiness, he knew he couldn't wait any longer. Vivian, he said softly. Yes? I'm going to kiss you now. Her breath caught. Okay. He leaned in slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted. She didn't. Their lips met, gentle at first, then deeper as months of wanting crashed together in a single moment. She tasted like chocolate and sugar cookies, and her hand came up to cup his face, and Ryan felt something inside him break open, not painfully, but like a release, like letting go of something he'd been holding too tightly for too long. When they finally separated, Vivian's eyes were bright. I've been wanting to do that for months, she whispered. Why didn't you? I was scared. And now? Still scared. She smiled, but more scared of never knowing what this could be. Daddy, the moon moved. They sprang apart guiltily, but Mia was still absorbed in her telescope, oblivious to what had just happened. It didn't move, Bug, Ryan said, his voice slightly unsteady. The earth rotated. Same thing, Vivian laughed, and the sound was like music. She's not wrong. They spent another hour at the telescope, taking turns looking at the moon and trying to find planets in the winter sky. Mia grew progressively sleepier, her questions becoming more muddled, her yawns more frequent. By 8 p.m., she was curled up on Vivian's couch with a blanket, fighting a losing battle against exhaustion. "I should get her home," Ryan said reluctantly. "I know." Vivian stood with him, walked them to the door. "Ryan, about what happened, don't." He took her hand. "Don't overthink it. Don't talk yourself out of it. Let's just let it be what it is." "And what is it?" "The beginning of something." Vivian's smile was soft, vulnerable in a way he'd never seen in the office. "I like the sound of that." He kissed her again, quickly, gently, and then gathered Mia in his arms and carried her to the elevator. She stirred slightly, but didn't wake, her face pressed against his shoulder. In the car, driving through streets that glittered with holiday lights and fresh snow, Ryan felt lighter than he had in years, lighter than he had since Sarah died, lighter than he'd thought he was allowed to feel again. His phone buzzed. "Vivian. Tonight was perfect." "Ryan, it really was." "Vivian. About Christmas. Mia asked if I would come. Is that okay?" Ryan smiled at the windshield. "Ryan. It's more than okay. It's what I want." "Vivian. Then I'll be there." Christmas Eve arrived wrapped in fresh snow and the smell of cinnamon. Ryan had been cooking since morning. Turkey, mashed potatoes, green bean casserole, all the dishes Sarah used to make. He'd learned the recipes out of necessity after she died, and while his versions weren't quite as good as hers, they were close enough to trigger the right memories without too much pain. Elaine arrived at 4, carrying a pie she'd made and wearing a Christmas sweater covered in sequined reindeer. "The house looks beautiful," she said, surveying the decorations Mia had insisted on. "Very festive." Mia's influence, she wanted everything to sparkle. She's not wrong. A little sparkle never hurt anyone. Elaine set down the pie and fixed Ryan with her knowing gaze. "So, Vivian's coming." "She is." "And you two are—" "We're figuring it out." Elaine nodded slowly. "Good. It's time, Ryan. Sarah wouldn't want you to be alone forever." The words hit him unexpectedly, and he had to blink back the sudden moisture in his eyes. "I know. She'd like Vivian, I think. Underneath all that corporate armor, she's got a good heart." "She does." "And Mia adores her." "Yeah, she really does." Elaine patted his arm. "Then stop looking so worried. You're allowed to be happy, Ryan. You're allowed to move on. That's not betraying anyone. It's honoring what you had by believing you can have it again." The doorbell rang before Ryan could respond, and Mia came thundering down the stairs. "She's here! Miss Hale is here!" Ryan opened the door to find Vivian on his porch, her arms full of wrapped presents, her cheeks flushed from the cold. She was wearing a red dress beneath her winter coat, nothing like the corporate suits he was used to, and her hair fell loose around her shoulders. "Merry Christmas," she said. "Merry Christmas." Mia was already pulling her inside, chattering about the tree and the cookies they'd left for Santa and the telescope she'd brought from Vivian's apartment to show Elaine. The evening unfolded in a warm blur of food and laughter and the comfortable chaos of family. Ryan watched Vivian interact with Elaine, watched her navigate the older woman's gentle interrogation with grace and humor, and felt something settle in his chest. This was right. This was how things were supposed to be. After dinner, they gathered in the living room to open presents. Mia tore through hers with characteristic enthusiasm, exclaiming over each new toy and book and game. Elaine received a cashmere scarf she'd been eyeing for months. Ryan got a first edition of his favorite novel that made his eyes go wide. "Where did you find this?" he asked Vivian. "I have connections." Her smile was sly. "I may have called in a few favors." Then it was Vivian's turn. Mia presented her gift first, a handmade card covered in glitter and stickers, with a crayon drawing of 3 figures standing together under a sun. "That's you, and that's Daddy, and that's me," Mia explained, pointing to each figure. "See? We're a family." Vivian's face did something complicated, a trembling around the lips, a brightness in the eyes that threatened to spill over. "It's beautiful," she managed. "I love it." Daddy has another present for you, Mia announced, bouncing with barely contained excitement. He's been hiding it for weeks. Ryan shot his daughter a look. Thanks for the build-up, bug. He retrieved the small wrapped box from where he'd hidden it behind the tree and handed it to Vivian. She opened it carefully, her fingers trembling slightly. Inside was a silver bracelet, simple and elegant, with a small charm in the shape of a star. For the woman who helped my daughter fall in love with the night sky, Ryan said quietly. And for the woman who helped me remember how to look up again. Vivian stared at the bracelet, then at Ryan, then back at the bracelet. When she looked up again, tears were streaming down her face. I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything. She stood, crossed the room, and kissed him, right there in front of Elaine and Mia and the Christmas tree. It was quick and tender and completely unambiguous. Mia giggled, Elaine smiled, and Ryan felt his heart crack open one more time, letting in light he hadn't known he was missing. Merry Christmas, Vivian whispered against his lips. The merriest I've had in years. Later, after Mia had been put to bed and Elaine had gone home with promises to return for leftovers tomorrow, Ryan and Vivian sat together on the couch, the Christmas tree lights casting soft patterns across the room. Thank you, Vivian said, for including me, for letting me be part of this. Thank you for wanting to be part of it. She was quiet for a moment, her head resting against his shoulder. I've been thinking about what Mia said, in her card, about being a family. And? Is that what we're becoming? A family? Ryan considered the question. He thought about Sarah, about the family they'd built together, the one that had been torn apart too soon. He thought about the years of loneliness that followed, the gray half-life of survival without really living. And he thought about Vivian, about the woman who had stumbled into his kitchen one October morning and somehow become essential to his happiness. I think we're becoming whatever we want to be, he said finally. And I want to be a family with you, if that's what you want too. Vivian turned to look at him, her eyes searching his face in the dim light. I've never been part of a family, she admitted. Not really. My parents were more like professors than parents. Everything was a lesson. Everything had a purpose. And Greg, that was a partnership, not a family. I've never had this. The warmth, the chaos, the belonging. Does it scare you? Terrifies me. She smiled. But I'm learning that the things worth having are usually the things that scare us most. Ryan kissed her forehead. Then let's be terrified together. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the lights blink on and off, listening to the quiet settling of an old house on a cold night. Stay, Ryan said softly. Not just tonight. I mean, yes, tonight. But also, stay. Be part of our mornings. Be here when Mia wakes up. Be here for all of it. Vivian was quiet for so long that Ryan worried he'd pushed too far, asked for too much. Then she said, yes. Yes? Yes to all of it. The mornings, the chaos, the everything. She turned to face him fully. I love you, Ryan. I've been too scared to say it, but I do. I love you, and I love Mia, and I love the life you've built here. And I want to be part of it, not just on Sundays, not just for ice cream and holidays, all of it. The words washed over him like warm water, like coming home after a long journey. I love you too, he said. I think I've loved you since you asked me if we'd slept together, and I realized how much I wanted the answer to be different. Vivian laughed, that surprised sound he'd grown to love. That's a terrible time to realize you have feelings for someone. Maybe, but it's the truth. She kissed him then, soft and slow, and Ryan let himself fall into it completely. The Ice Queen was gone, had been gone for months. In her place was this warm, vulnerable, complicated woman who had somehow found her way into his broken heart and started putting it back together. Upstairs, Mia slept beneath her butterfly blanket, dreaming of stars and snow and the family that was forming around her. Outside, the snow continued to fall, blanketing the world in white. And in the living room of a house that had known too much grief and not enough joy, two people who had both thought they were finished with love discovered that some stories don't end when you expect them to. Some stories are just beginning. The winter melted into spring the way all winters do, gradually, then all at once. One morning, Ryan woke to find the snow had retreated, leaving behind a world of mud and new green shoots and the unmistakable smell of earth coming back to life. The gray skies lifted, replaced by the soft blue of Oregon springtime, and with them lifted something inside Ryan that he hadn't realized was still heavy. Vivian had kept her word. She stayed. Not every night at first, they were both too cautious for that, too aware of the delicate balance they were building. But more and more often, Ryan would wake to find her beside him, her auburn hair spread across Sarah's old pillow, and the sight no longer felt like a betrayal. It felt like permission, like healing, like the closing of one chapter and the opening of another. Mia, for her part, adapted with the easy flexibility of childhood. Vivian became a fixture in their routine, present at breakfast, helping with homework, reading bedtime stories when Ryan was too exhausted. She didn't try to replace anyone. She simply existed, filled the spaces she was given, and waited for more spaces to open up. "Daddy," Mia said one Saturday morning in late March, "when is Ms. Hale going to live here for real?" Ryan looked up from his coffee. Vivian was still upstairs, sleeping in after a brutal week of budget meetings and board presentations. "What do you mean, bug?" "I mean, live here, like forever, with all her stuff. Would you want that?" Mia gave him the look she reserved for particularly stupid questions. "Obviously, she makes you smile, and she's really good at braiding hair, better than you." "Everyone's better at braiding hair than me. That's true." Mia returned to her cereal. "So when?" Ryan didn't have an answer. He and Vivian had talked around the subject, danced near it, but never quite landed on it directly. They were both so careful, so afraid of disrupting the fragile happiness they'd built. Moving in together felt like the next logical step, but logic had nothing to do with the fear that still lived in the corners of Ryan's heart. The fear that said, what if this ends too? What if you lose her the way you lost Sarah? What if Mia gets attached and then has to grieve all over again? Footsteps on the stairs interrupted his spiraling thoughts, and then Vivian appeared in the kitchen doorway, her hair mussed from sleep, wearing one of Ryan's old t-shirts. "Good morning," she said, her voice still rough with sleep. "Ms. Hale!" Mia waved her spoon enthusiastically. "I was just asking Daddy when you're going to live here for real." Vivian's eyes found Ryan's over Mia's head, a question in them. "We were discussing logistics," Ryan said weakly. "Logistics." Vivian's mouth twitched. "Is that what we're calling it?" "Daddy doesn't know how to answer hard questions," Mia informed her. "He gets all weird and starts talking about logistics and practical considerations." "Does he now?" "It's very annoying." Vivian laughed and crossed to the coffee maker, her hand brushing Ryan's shoulder as she passed. The touch was casual, intimate, the kind of contact that came from months of learning each other's bodies and boundaries. "Maybe," Vivian said carefully, "we should have a family meeting about it. All three of us." Mia perked up immediately. "A family meeting? Like a real family?" "Like a real family." "Can we have it now?" Ryan looked at Vivian, who looked back at him, and something passed between them. A silent agreement, a mutual surrender to the inevitable. "Okay," Ryan said. "Let's have a family meeting." They moved to the living room, Mia bouncing onto the couch between them. The morning sun streamed through the windows, painting everything gold. Outside, a bird was singing, the first one Ryan had heard since autumn. "So," Vivian began, her voice steady despite the slight tremor in her hands, "Mia asked a very good question about me living here." "I think you should," Mia said immediately. "I appreciate that. But it's not just up to you, sweetheart. It's up to all of us. And it's a big decision." "Why?" Vivian looked to Ryan for help. "Because," he said slowly, "when someone moves in, it means they're part of the family, really part of it. And that means everyone's life changes." "Good changes?" "We hope so. But change is always a little scary, even when it's good." Mia considered this with her usual intensity. "Is it scary for you, Daddy?" Ryan's throat tightened. "Yeah, Bug, a little." "Why?" "How do you explain to a 7-year-old the fear of loving someone again? The terror of building something beautiful only to watch it shatter? The weight of grief that never fully lifts, only shifts to make room for new joy?" Because I loved your mom very much, Ryan said finally. And when she died, I didn't think I could ever love anyone else like that again. But then Ms. Hale came along, and I started to feel things I thought were gone forever. And that's wonderful, but it's also scary. Because what if something bad happens again? Mia was quiet for a long moment. Then she reached out and took Ryan's hand in her small one. Daddy, she said, bad things happen sometimes. That's just how it is. But you can't not love people because you're scared. That would be really lonely. Ryan stared at his daughter, this tiny person who contained so much of Sarah and so much of himself and so much of something entirely her own. When did you get so wise? He managed. I've always been wise. You just don't listen. Vivian laughed, and the sound broke the tension that had been building in the room. She reached over and took Mia's other hand, completing the circle. Mia's right, she said. Being scared isn't a reason not to do something. It's just a feeling. And feelings pass. She looked at Ryan. I'm scared too. I've never done this before, never been part of a family, never had someone to come home to. I don't know if I'll be good at it. I don't know if I'll make mistakes. You will, Ryan said. We both will. But we'll make them together? Together. Mia squeezed both their hands. So is that a yes? Is she moving in? Ryan looked at Vivian, at the woman who had stumbled into his life one drunken October night and somehow become the center of it. What do you say? He asked. Want to make this official? Vivian's eyes were bright with unshed tears. I thought you'd never ask. So that's a yes? That's a yes. Mia erupted from his couch with a shriek of joy, jumping up and down and chanting, She's moving in! She's moving in! At the top of her lungs. The noise was deafening, chaotic, absolutely perfect. Ryan pulled Vivian into a kiss while their daughter celebrated around them, and for the first time in years, the future didn't feel like something to survive. It felt like something to look forward to. The move happened gradually over the following weeks. Vivian's apartment was sleek and minimal. She'd started over after the divorce, after all, so there wasn't much to transport. Boxes arrived one by one, filling spaces Ryan hadn't realized were empty. A coffee maker that was better than his. Books that filled the shelves he'd never bothered to stock. Throw pillows in colors Sarah would have loved. The house began to feel different, fuller, warmer, like a home instead of a memorial. But it wasn't all smooth sailing. There were adjustments, frictions, the inevitable clashes that came from two established lives trying to merge into one. Vivian was used to silence in the mornings. Ryan and Mia were not. Ryan was used to leaving his shoes by the door. Vivian found this inexplicably maddening. Mia wanted attention at all hours. Vivian sometimes needed space to decompress after work. This is harder than I thought, Vivian admitted one night, after a particularly difficult evening involving a work crisis, a homework meltdown, and a burnt dinner. I don't know how you've been doing this alone for 4 years. Some days I don't know either, Ryan said honestly, but you learn to adapt. You learn that some battles aren't worth fighting and some hills aren't worth dying on. You learn that good enough is actually pretty good. I'm not used to good enough. I'm used to perfect. There's no such thing as perfect. Not in families. There's just love and effort and forgiveness when things go wrong. Vivian was quiet for a moment. My parents never forgave anything. Every mistake was a lesson. Every failure was a character flaw. I grew up thinking that one wrong step would make me unlovable. And now? Now I'm learning that being lovable isn't about being perfect. It's about being present. About showing up even when you're tired, even when you failed, even when you don't know what you're doing. She smiled ruefully. Mia's teaching me that. You both are. Ryan pulled her close. For what it's worth, I think you're doing great. I burnt dinner. Dinner's overrated. We had cereal. Mia was thrilled. That can't be healthy. One night of cereal isn't going to kill anyone, and she got to see that adults make mistakes too. That's a valuable lesson. Vivian shook her head, but she was smiling now. You make it sound so easy. It's not easy. It's never easy. But it's worth it. You're worth it. She kissed him then, soft and lingering, and Ryan felt the last of the day's stress melt away. This was what he'd been missing for 4 years. Not just a partner, but a presence. Someone to share the load, to witness his failures and celebrate his victories, to be there when the lights went out and the doubts crept in. They were building something real, something lasting. And despite all his fears, Ryan was starting to believe it might actually work. Spring turned to summer, and with it came the milestone Ryan had been both anticipating and dreading, Mia's spring recital. A year ago, he'd missed it, had sacrificed his daughter's performance to help a drunk stranger, had watched the video later with a hole in his chest where the memory should have been. Now that same stranger was sitting beside him in the front row of the auditorium, holding his hand, wearing the star bracelet he'd given her at Christmas. Nervous? Vivian asked. Terrified. She's been practicing for weeks. She's going to be perfect. That's not what I'm scared of. Vivian squeezed his hand. I know. The auditorium filled around them. Parents and grandparents and siblings, all there to watch their children twirl and jump and occasionally bump into each other. Ryan spotted Elaine a few rows back, wearing another one of her signature holiday sweaters, this one covered in flowers for spring, and waving enthusiastically. The lights dimmed, the music started, and then, like a parade of butterflies, the children emerged onto the stage. Mia was in the front row, exactly where she'd been a year ago. But this time, when her eyes scanned the audience, they found Ryan immediately, found Vivian beside him, found the family she'd helped create through sheer force of will and 7-year-old wisdom. She smiled, not the terrifying toothy grin she'd practiced in the mirror, but something softer, something real. The dance began. Ryan watched his daughter move across the stage with a grace she'd definitely inherited from Sarah. She hit every mark, nailed every step, and when the music swelled for the big twirl, the one she'd been talking about for months, she spun like the whole world revolved around her. Beside him, Vivian gasped. She's incredible. I know. I can't believe I almost missed this. A year ago you were someone else. We both were. Vivian turned to look at him, her eyes bright in the dim light. Thank you for that night, for helping me when I didn't deserve it, for giving me a second chance at all of this. You gave yourself that chance. I just opened the door. The music reached its finale, and all the children spread their arms wide for the big finish. Mia's face was radiant, lit from within by the kind of joy that had nothing to do with practice or perfection. The audience erupted in applause. Ryan was on his feet before he knew it, clapping until his hands hurt, tears streaming down his face. Vivian was beside him, cheering just as loudly, and somewhere behind them, Elaine was whistling through her fingers like she was at a baseball game. Mia found them again in the audience, and her smile grew even wider, if that was possible. This, Ryan thought, this is what I almost lost. This is what I almost sacrificed. This is everything. After the recital, they took Mia for ice cream, the waterfront shop, their place, 3 scoops as always. She chattered about the performance, about which of her classmates had messed up and which had been perfect, about how Miss Caroline had cried backstage and said they were the best class she'd ever taught. And did you see my twirl? She demanded for the 100th time. Did you see how I didn't fall? We saw, Ryan assured her. You were amazing. The best twirler in the whole world, Vivian added. Mia beamed and returned to her ice cream, satisfied. Ryan reached across the table and took Vivian's hand. She looked at him, questioning. I want to ask you something, he said. Okay. Not here. Later. When Mia's asleep. Vivian's eyebrows rose slightly, but she didn't push. Okay. The rest of the evening passed in a happy blur. They went home, had dinner, watched a movie while Mia fought a losing battle against sleep. By 8 p.m., she was out cold on the couch, ice cream still faintly visible around her mouth. Ryan carried her to bed, tucked her in, kissed her forehead. I love you, Bug. Love you too, Daddy, she mumbled, already mostly asleep. Tell Miss Hale I love her too. I will. He stood in the doorway for a moment, watching her breathe, marveling at how much could change in a year. Then he went downstairs to find Vivian. She was in the kitchen, washing the last of the dishes, her movements efficient and familiar. She'd learned the rhythms of this house, Ryan realized, had made herself part of its fabric without trying to replace what came before. Hey, he said from the doorway. She turned, drying her hands on a towel. Hey yourself, Mia asleep? Out like a light. She says she loves you. Vivian's face softened. I love her too. I know you do. They stood there for a moment, the kitchen quiet around them, the last light of evening fading through the windows. You said you wanted to ask me something, Vivian prompted. Ryan's heart was pounding so hard he could feel it in his throat. He'd rehearsed this 1,000 times, had planned the perfect words, the perfect moment. But standing here now, all his preparation fled. Let me get something first, he said. Wait here. He went to the living room, to the drawer in the end table where he'd hidden the small velvet box 3 weeks ago. His hands were shaking as he picked it up, shaking as he returned to the kitchen, shaking as he found Vivian exactly where he'd left her, watching him with an expression caught between curiosity and something else, something that looked a lot like hope. Ryan, she breathed. What is that? He stopped in front of her, close enough to see the flecks of gold in her blue eyes, close enough to count the faint freckles scattered across her nose. A year ago, he said, I found a woman passed out in my car. I helped her because it was the right thing to do, and I had no idea how much that one decision would change my life. Ryan, let me finish, please. She nodded, her eyes fixed on the box in his hands. When Sarah died, I thought that was it. I thought I'd had my shot at love, and it was over. I spent 4 years just surviving, taking care of Mia, going to work, putting one foot in front of the other. I didn't think I'd ever feel anything again. Didn't think I wanted to. He paused, gathering himself. Then you came along, and at first you were just my boss, demanding and difficult and impossible to please. But then I saw who you really are. The person underneath the armor, the woman who admits she's scared, who tries even when she doesn't know what she's doing, who loves my daughter like she's her own. Vivian's eyes were wet now, tears spilling down her cheeks. You didn't just give me a second chance at love, Ryan continued. You gave Mia a mother again. You gave this house a heartbeat. You made me believe that broken things can be put back together, not the way they were before, but in new ways that are just as beautiful. He opened the box. Inside was a ring, simple, elegant, a single diamond surrounded by tiny sapphires that caught the fading light. Vivian Hale, Ryan said, his voice cracking on her name. Will you marry me? The silence that followed felt like forever. Vivian stared at the ring, then at Ryan, then back at the ring. Her whole body was trembling. Are you sure? She whispered. Are you absolutely sure? Because once we do this, there's no going back. I'll be in your life forever, and Mia's life, and I need to know that you're sure. I've never been more sure of anything. But what about Sarah? What about... Ryan reached out and cupped her face in his hands, tilting her eyes to meet his. Sarah will always be part of this family. Her pictures are still on the walls, her memory is still in this house, and she'll always be Mia's mother. Nothing changes that. But she's gone, Vivian, and I'm still here. And I want to spend whatever time I have left with you. That's... Vivian laughed through her tears. That's simultaneously the most romantic and most morbid thing anyone's ever said to me. Is that a yes? You haven't let me answer yet. I'm nervous. I talk when I'm nervous. Vivian took a deep, shaky breath. Then she reached out and took the ring from the box, sliding it onto her own finger with hands that trembled slightly. Yes, she said. Yes, I'll marry you. Yes to all of it. The mornings and the chaos and the burnt dinners and the recitals and the ice cream and the everything. Yes. Ryan pulled her into his arms and kissed her, tasting salt and chocolate and something that felt a lot like forever. Her arms came around him, holding tight, and for a long moment they just stood there in the kitchen, two people who had thought they were finished with love, discovering they were just getting started. We should tell Mia, Vivian said eventually, her voice muffled against his chest. Tomorrow. Let her sleep. She's going to lose her mind. Probably. It's going to be loud. Very loud. Worth it. Vivian pulled back to look at him, her eyes red-rimmed but shining with something Ryan could only call joy. I love you, she said. I don't think I've said it enough. I love you, Ryan Carter. I love your daughter and your house and your terrible pancakes. My pancakes are not terrible. They're a little terrible, but I love them anyway. I love all of it, every single bit. Ryan kissed her forehead. I love you too. Every single bit. They stood there until the light was completely gone, until the kitchen was dark and the house was quiet, and the only sound was their breathing, in sync like their hearts. Tomorrow, they would tell Mia. Tomorrow, there would be screaming and jumping and probably more ice cream. Tomorrow, they would start planning a wedding, a future, a life together. But tonight was just for them. The wedding was in October, exactly 1 year after the night that started it all. Ryan had wanted something small, intimate, just family and close friends in the backyard of the house that had become their home. Vivian had wanted the same, though she'd joked that her corporate brain kept trying to turn it into a networking event. "No business cards at the altar," Ryan had said firmly. "You're no fun." "I'm extremely fun. Ask Mia." The day arrived wrapped in golden autumn light, the kind of perfect October afternoon that felt designed by a higher power specifically for this moment. The backyard had been transformed, white chairs arranged in neat rows, an arch of flowers at the end of the aisle, fairy lights strung through the trees. Ryan stood at the altar in a suit that Elaine had helped him pick out, his heart pounding so hard he was sure everyone could hear it. "Nervous?" his best man asked. Ryan turned to look at Dennis, who had transformed from office gossip to genuine friend over the past year. "Terrified." "Good. That means it matters." The music started, not the traditional wedding march, but a song that Mia had chosen, something soft and hopeful that Ryan couldn't name but would never forget. And then Vivian appeared at the end of the aisle. She was stunning. There was no other word for it. Her dress was simple, elegant, exactly what Ryan would have expected from a woman who had spent her whole life in corporate armor but had learned, slowly, to let herself be soft. Her hair was down, flowing around her shoulders the way it had been that first morning in his kitchen. But what made Ryan's breath catch wasn't the dress or the hair, or the way the light caught the tears on her cheeks. It was the fact that she wasn't walking alone. Mia was beside her, holding her hand, wearing a white dress covered in flowers. They walked together, his daughter and his soon-to-be wife, and Ryan understood with sudden, overwhelming clarity that this wasn't just a wedding. It was a family being born. Mia reached the altar first, releasing Vivian's hand and taking her place at Ryan's side. "You look pretty, Daddy," she whispered. "You look prettier, Bug." Then Vivian was there, standing in front of him, her eyes reflecting everything he felt but couldn't say. The officiant spoke, but Ryan barely heard the words. He was lost in Vivian's gaze, lost in the impossibility of this moment, lost in the sheer, overwhelming gratitude of being here at all. When it came time for the vows, Vivian spoke first. "Ryan," she said, her voice steady despite the tears tracking down her face. "A year ago, I was the last person who deserved your kindness. I was broken and bitter, and completely certain that I would spend the rest of my life alone. Then you helped me. Not because you had to, not because there was anything in it for you, but simply because it was the right thing to do. And in doing so, you showed me what love actually looks like. It looks like patience. It looks like forgiveness. It looks like showing up even when it's hard, even when you're scared, even when you don't know what you're doing. I promise to love you that way for the rest of my life. I promise to show up, always. I promise to be the family you've given me the chance to be." Ryan had to take a moment to collect himself before he could respond. "Vivian," he finally managed, "I thought I knew what love was. I'd had it once, and I thought that was it. One great love per lifetime, and mine was over. But you taught me something different. You taught me that love isn't a limited resource, that the heart expands to make room for more, that honoring what came before doesn't mean closing the door on what comes next." He glanced at Mia, who was watching with wide, wet eyes. "You didn't just give me a second chance at love. You gave my daughter a mother who adores her, who challenges her, who shows her every day what it means to be strong and soft at the same time. For that, and for everything else, I promise to love you for the rest of my life. I promise to never let you forget how worthy you are of happiness. I promise to make you pancakes every Saturday, even if they're a little terrible." Laughter rippled through the small crowd. Vivian laughed too, tears streaming freely now. The officiant smiled. "By the power vested in me, I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss the bride." Ryan pulled Vivian into his arms and kissed her while their families cheered, while Mia jumped up and down beside them, while the autumn sun poured golden light over everything. When they finally broke apart, Mia squeezed between them, wrapping one arm around Ryan and one around Vivian. "We're a family now," she announced, as if this were news. "A real family." "We've been a real family for a while, Bug," Ryan said. "I know, but now it's official." Vivian laughed and ruffled Mia's hair. "Now it's official." The reception was everything Ryan had hoped for and nothing he'd planned. Guests mingled in the backyard, eating food from the local caterer, dancing to music that ranged from classic rock to Disney soundtracks. Mia's influence. Elaine gave a toast that made everyone cry. Dennis gave a toast that made everyone laugh. And somewhere in the middle of it all, Ryan found himself standing alone with his new wife, watching their daughter teach Vivian's confused-looking colleagues how to do the chicken dance. "Happy?" Vivian asked. "Beyond words." "Any regrets?" Ryan turned to look at her. This woman who had transformed his life in ways he never could have predicted. "Just one," he said. Vivian's face fell. "What?" "I wish I'd helped you sooner. I wish I'd found you years ago, before either of us had to go through so much pain alone." Vivian's expression softened. "But we wouldn't have been ready. I wouldn't have been ready. It took losing everything to finally understand what actually mattered." "And what matters?" She gestured at the scene before them. Mia laughing, guests dancing, fairy lights twinkling in the gathering dusk. This, all of this, the people who show up when you need them most, the love that finds you when you've stopped looking for it, the family that forms not because of blood or obligation, but because everyone chooses each other every single day. Ryan pulled her close, breathing in the scent of her perfume, feeling the solid warmth of her body against his. "I choose you," he said. "I choose you too." They stood there as the party swirled around them, as the music played and the laughter rose and the stars began to appear overhead. Mia eventually broke away from the dance floor and ran toward them, crashing into their embrace with the force of a small hurricane. "Are you guys going to dance?" she demanded. "You're supposed to dance. It's your wedding." "We were just having a moment," Ryan explained. "Well, have a moment while dancing. That's what moments are for." Vivian laughed. "She's got a point." "She usually does." They made their way to the dance floor, the three of them together, swaying to a slow song that Ryan would later claim he didn't remember crying during. He absolutely did. Mia stood on Ryan's feet like she had when she was 4 years old, and Vivian held them both, and for one perfect moment, everything was exactly as it should be. Later, much later, after the guests had gone home and Mia had collapsed into bed, exhausted from dancing and excitement and pure overwhelming joy, Ryan and Vivian sat on the porch together, looking at the stars. "1 year ago," Vivian said softly, "I was the woman who almost destroyed your life. 1 year ago, you were the woman who saved it. That's generous." "It's true." Ryan turned to face her. "If you hadn't stumbled into that parking garage, if I hadn't helped you home, if none of this had happened, I'd still be just surviving, still going through the motions, still missing everything that actually matters. You would have found your way eventually. Maybe, but I found it with you, and that's the version of the story I want to keep telling." Vivian leaned her head against his shoulder. "What do you think happens next?" "I don't know. More mornings, more chaos, more ice cream and recitals and burnt dinners. More terrible pancakes?" "My pancakes are not terrible. They're a little terrible. They're dependable." Vivian laughed. "I'll take dependable." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars wheel overhead. Somewhere in the house, their daughter slept peacefully, dreaming of butterflies and telescopes and the family she'd willed into existence through sheer determination. And on the porch of a house that had known grief and loss and 4 years of quiet survival, two people who had almost never found each other sat together and watched the night unfold. Ryan thought about everything that had led to this moment. Sarah's death, the years of loneliness, the company party, the drunk woman who couldn't find her keys. So many things that seemed like disasters at the time, that felt like the universe conspiring against his happiness. But they weren't disasters. They were doorways. Every closed door had led to an open window. Every ending had been a secret beginning, Every moment of despair had been a step toward this, toward Vivian, toward their family, toward a future he'd never dared to imagine. "Hey," he said softly. "Hey yourself. I love you." Vivian turned to look at him, her face illuminated by starlight, her eyes holding everything he'd ever wanted. "I love you too," she said. "More than I ever thought I could love anyone, more than I knew I was capable of feeling. Scared? Terrified. Me too." They smiled at each other, the smiles of two people who had walked through fire and come out the other side, scarred but not broken, changed but not diminished. "So what do we do now?" Vivian asked. Ryan took her hand, lacing his fingers through hers. "Now," he said, "we live." And they did. They lived through the good days and the hard ones, through minor arguments and major celebrations, through all the ordinary moments that add up to an extraordinary life. They watched Mia grow from a 7-year-old with two big opinions into a young woman with the same sharp eyes and kind heart. They built new traditions and honored old ones, made new memories while cherishing the ones that came before. Ryan never forgot Sarah. Her photo stayed on the mantle. Her memory stayed in his heart. And every year on the anniversary of her death, he took flowers to her grave and told her about the life he was living, the love he'd found, the family he'd built, the happiness he'd finally allowed himself to feel. And somehow, he knew she approved. Years later, when people asked how they'd met, Ryan and Vivian would exchange a look, the kind of look that contains entire conversations, entire histories, entire worlds of shared experience. "It's a long story," Vivian would say. "The best ones always are," Ryan would add. And Mia, who had grown tall and sharp and beautiful, would roll her eyes and launch into the full tale. Embellished, of course, because she'd inherited her mother's flair for drama and her father's tendency to find meaning in chaos. But the heart of the story remained the same. Two broken people found each other. A little girl saw what the adults were too scared to see. And love, patient, stubborn, terrifying love, rebuilt what grief had torn apart. It wasn't a fairy tale. There were no princes or castles, no magic spells or perfect endings. But it was real, and it was theirs. And in the end, that was more than enough. The end.